Hello. If you were looking for a scare tonight, you've come to the right place. I'll be narrating an hour's worth of creepy horror stories that I found off of Reddit. So without further ado,
These are their stories.
Olduvai Gorge, Tanzania 2024. The excavation has gone smoothly these past 3 weeks, but today we've encountered something so strange that it warranted the creation of this entry you're presently reading. As of this moment, I'm not sure whether or not to officially publish these finds, as I fear for the repercussions it may produce, and I do not wish to tarnish my professional legacy. The reason I'm even writing this entry to begin with is to keep a personal record of these recent events while they're fresh in my mind, but I also intend to post it anonymously to the internet, where it will likely be swept away and disregarded as a hoax or urban legend. I'm fine with that, I just need to get it off my chest. I know it's not rational or even a good idea to share this with strangers, but I just need to tell someone. Maybe someone will know what is going on. Until I have fully decided on whether or not to publish, I will keep this as anonymous as I can. I'm a paleoanthropologist at an esteemed university in the States, and I've been leading a small excavation team here in Tanzania at one of the oldest sites of hominin occupation in the world, Olduvai Gorge. Our excavation site was located on the eastern stretches of the gorge, in a particularly hilly area, as scouted by our surveyors. They chose this spot due to the presence of a series of small and seemingly undiscovered rock shelters hidden away behind thick shrubbery and debris. It is nothing short of a miracle that they were able to be located by our team. Over these past weeks, we have found here an abundance of lithic assemblages, most of them consisting of Oldowan scrapers and cores, but we also found a pair of Aculean hand axes and a few bifacial points. Deep in one of the rock shelters, we even unearthed the partial remains of what is most likely an Australopithecine upper skull, though further osteological analysis is pending. All seemed to be going well until today, when my lunch break was interrupted by one of my students. I will refer to him as Edward. He came rushing over from the easternmost rock shelter, nearly stumbling over all the pebbles and sticks in his way as he hurried down the hill toward the tents, calling my name. I rose from my seat to greet him, fearing that some sort of accident had happened. "What is it?" I anxiously inquired. I had never seen him this upset. "You gotta come check this out, right now," he replied enigmatically and ushered me to follow him. I went with him up the hill and into the mouth of the rock shelter. Immediately I noticed what all the fuss was about. Deep in the innermost end of the rock shelter, past all the excavation tools and equipment, where there had previously been a solid rock wall, there was now a small opening. I saw the small hole next to this big rock, and I just kept digging and digging, and I moved some more rocks, and "Oh, okay, you should have notified me sooner," I said, cutting him off as I ventured deeper into the shelter toward the gaping hole. I feared that, in his eagerness, he may have disturbed an important context. But the thing is, I looked inside it, with my light and whatnot, and I saw these, things. You better take a look. I crouched down beside the hole and searched my pockets for my flashlight. The opening seemed big enough for someone to crawl into, and as I turned on the light, the shining beam illuminated a massive cavern on the other side, probably big enough to stand in. "Remarkable," I uttered. "Shine your light at the far end walls. Do you see them?" Edward probed. I did as he had asked me, and as my light moved across the dusty volcanic rock walls of the chamber, I laid my eyes on something that made my heart skip a beat. First believing it to be merely a trick of the light, I stuck my head deeper into the opening to get a better view. "You see them, don't you?" Edward's voice echoed behind me. Lost for words, I began crawling through the opening, eagerly disregarding any health and safety precautions one would be wise to employ when venturing into such undiscovered cave environments. I heard Edward calling out to me as I did so, begging me to be careful. I scraped up my arms and legs in the process, and as I emerged on the other side, I was completely covered in dust, which I promptly brushed off my rugged clothes as I stood up. On the far end wall were a series of rough carvings onto the rock. Carvings in the Latin alphabet, carvings in English. The whole wall was full of them, as if it was a page in a book. Behind me, I heard Edward grunting and shuffling as he made his way through the opening to join me in my astonishment. I scanned the rest of the cavern with my light and saw that the inscriptions continued on the other surfaces and walls of the chamber. Not only that, but I noticed a series of strange artifacts scattered about, seemingly undisturbed for millennia. Among them were several aforementioned Oldowan stone tools and a ring made of mostly pure gold, judging by its pristine condition, as well as some bones randomly strewn around. My immediate thoughts were that the cave must have been used in modern times, perhaps recently. I hadn't yet actually read the content of what was scribbled on the walls, but even still, something about that explanation immediately felt off. The strata next to where the opening had been was undisturbed and had naturally accumulated for millions of years. I should know because I monitored it closely yesterday when we started digging in that part of the rock shelter. I realize some of you reading this might not be familiar with stratigraphy and thus not fully understand why this would be an issue when regarding the date of the inscriptions, but those well acquainted with the law of superposition should know exactly why this shouldn't be possible. If you don't, I urge you to Google it. But to make a long story short, however, the law of superposition states that geological layers accumulate over time, and that under normal circumstances, the layers that are the oldest are those found further down. Now, assuming the entrance we came in is the only entrance into the cave, and taking into consideration the opening was buried under a dozen stratigraphical layers, it means that it was last sealed around 1 million years ago at the earliest. Everything about this was strikingly anachronistic, but I saw no other explanation. There seemed to be no other way to enter the cave, and there was no sign of a previous collapse. "What is this, Edward?" I asked him, who was now full of dirt and standing beside me. "Are you pulling my leg here? Is this some kind of elaborate joke?" "No, sir, I promise." "It shouldn't be possible then," I said, pacing back and forth. "Yet, evidently it is." He somewhat snarkily replied. I ignored him. My pacing took me around a slight bend in the cave, and I noticed a heap of what looked like different chunks of various metals. Some seemed to be nearly reduced to dust as a result of deterioration over time, while others looked pretty much to be in pristine condition, although not as shiny as they once probably were. There were also snake-like lines in the sandy floor of the cave with traces of heavily oxidized copper encompassed within them. Had these once been wires? If they were ever covered in plastic, as most wires today are, it must have broken down millennia ago, leaving no trace. Quite remarkable. "Doc, you should see what's written on these walls." Edward's voice echoed around the bend. "Just a second," I replied, carefully observing the strange assemblage and analyzing it as best as I could. I had never seen anything like it in my life. Was this a machine? "Whoa, like you really need to come right now," Edward again urged me. I emerged from behind the bend to see what all the fuss was about, and when I did, I noticed the dusty visage of Edward looking pale as a ghost. "What's the matter?" I asked, looking at where the beam of his flashlight was illuminating the inscribed wall. "Read what it says," Edward urged me, and so I did. In the following section of this entry, I will recount word for word what was inscribed on those walls. Where there is significant erosion or other obstruction of the text, I have filled in the gaps. From what I interpreted to be the beginning, the upper left corner, it read as follows. "Upon arrival, the machine broke down almost instantaneously. I am the only living Homo sapiens in the world, and there won't be another like me for at least 2 million years. There is an overwhelming hopelessness to it all. There is no hope for me. I have accepted it. These things, these devils, have left me no other choice than to seal myself into this tomb. I can hear them at night digging and scratching." Thus read the first section of the text. Beneath it, the next one read, "My name is Bill Hartnell, and I was born on the 29th of September 2029 in Exeter, England, and this is my full story. I'm stuck in here for the foreseeable future, so I might as well tell my tale in as much detail as I can. I've got nothing better to do to pass my remaining time. Apologies if I don't get to finish it. Writing on this wall is somewhat tedious, however, so I will be concise. Forgive me. I studied quantum mechanics at Exxon and graduated with my PhD in 2058. The machine I built subsequently took me 10 years to complete and was operational by 2068, which is also the year I traveled here. I have now been here for a total of 2 weeks, and fear this may be my last. If you find this message, Patricia, you were both right and wrong. Right in that it would end badly, but wrong in that it wouldn't at least work." The writing ceased as this wall had met with the ground, but it continued on another, larger register to its upper right. My goal was to travel through time and witness every significant human benchmark in chronological order, starting here with the earliest use of tools and ending my tour with the 2029 Mars landing launch. But now it seems the beginning of the human story will be the end of mine. There is something else here, something that doesn't belong. One moment I was in my garage in Exeter, ready to go, and in the next a blinding white glare surrounded me, and as I opened my eyes I found myself on the prehistoric African continent. I immediately felt the scorching heat of the sun burn into my skin, and in that moment I cursed myself for not bringing sun protection. Such an obvious oversight, I thought. My pale British skin would be the death of me. The first thing that stood out to me was how humid it was compared to the present. If my calculations are correct, I should be at the site of Olduvai Gorge, but here there is neither a gorge nor the arid shrubland it is known for. This place is ripe with vegetation and fauna. As I stepped out of the machine, I noticed it had broken, and I dragged it off into a nearby cave for protection until I could get it running again. I spent my first night inside that cave, sheltered from the elements and wildlife, and trying to repair my device. It was a futile effort, as I do not possess the parts necessary for such a repair. Another fatal oversight. My first 4 nights were relatively normal, or as normal as you would expect them to be 2 million years in the past. On my second day, I cautiously ventured outside the shelter, and it didn't take long for me to make contact with the locals. Presumably they are Homo habilis, but it is hard to tell. I am a physicist, not an anthropologist. Seeing them in the flesh is a surreal experience. To think I am the first human to lay eyes on another living human species in 40,000 years is extraordinary. I guess this writing also technically makes for the earliest writing in human history, which is also neat. The other humans first greeted me with a sort of reserved curiosity. They carried in their hands various stone tools and looked bizarre, though to them I probably looked equally strange. If they had the cognitive abilities to form thoughts about religion, I must have resembled a god to them. They let me observe them from a distance and never posed any problems. If anything, they wanted nothing to do with me. I find it ironic how these people live in dwellings constructed between trees and shrubbery out in the open, while it is myself who is living in a cave like some troglodyte. On the 5th night, things got strange. Just as the sun was setting, I was heading back to my cave when I heard my name called out, almost like a faint whisper, coming from the tree line a short distance away. That voice, raspy and out of breath, I had never heard anything like it before. I am positive it was not made by any of the local hominins. I briefly decided to investigate, but when I heard rapid approaching commotion in the bush, I took off. In my terror, I heard the loud snapping of twigs behind me. I ran all the way back to the cave and sealed the medium-sized opening with a makeshift door made out of wood and some rocks. I leaned in and listened intently after any noise, and heard the rustling of some bushes not too far away, accompanied by some kind of raspy vocalization. Nothing else happened that night. The following morning, I saw outside my shelter concentric circles drawn in the sand, but no accompanying footprints. Later that day, I was led into the village of the hominins. There, I traded my phone for some stone tools. I had no use for it anymore. The humans seemed perplexed by it, but were equally enchanted by its reflective surfaces. They allowed me to take some fruits and berries, but would not let me near the game meat, shouting whenever I did so. Despite that, I still can't believe the hospitality they showed me. As the sun was setting, I left the forested shelter of my ancestors and began walking back to the cave. The volume of trees gradually subsided, and I found myself in an open and lush savanna-like environment, but with thick shrubs on either side of the path. Then suddenly, something struck the ground in front of me, nearly hitting me. It was my phone. Confused, I thought the humans had grown tired of it and followed me back in anger. But then something intriguing happened. Another phone struck the ground right next to the first one, clearly of the same make and clearly identical to the one I had traded hours earlier. But that was impossible, as I had only brought one. Then another flew out from a nearby bush, hitting me in the arm. I looked around, scanning the bushes, but I saw nothing. I slowly backed up, and when I did so, the bushes rustled for a moment and then stopped. I took another step backward, and the rustling repeated and once again stopped. It was mimicking me. When I finally made that realization, I once more ran back to the cave at full sprint, quickly sealing the entrance behind me. As I turned on my headlamp, which I still had batteries for, I noticed something drawn on the sandy floor of the cave. It was another concentric circle, identical to the one outside this morning. I was too horrified to sleep, but eventually my tiredness gave in, and I drifted off. I spent the next day teaching myself how to hunt. Though I had some food rations from modern times back in the cave, eventually I would need to learn how to hunt if I were to survive out here, I figured. I had tried in the morning to hunt some lizards and birds with the stone weaponry I acquired the day prior, but with little success. I couldn't survive on berries and fruits alone, so I decided that the only way to get some protein around these parts would be to accompany a hunting party. I waited outside the village until the men left for their daily hunt, but as I approached them, they angrily detested my presence, denying my company. They waved their arms at me, ushering me to keep a distance, so for the rest of the day, I did exactly that. I lived in their shadow, observing but never interrupting their hunt. The following hours were spent watching the H. habilis hunt some local megafauna. Among them was an animal that is now extinct, therefore I do not know its name, but it resembled some kind of elephant. As I, from a distance, watched my early ancestors secure the kill and slice off chunks chunks of meat with their stone scrapers, the most eerie thing occurred. About 9 of the humans stood gathered around the elephantine creature when suddenly something pale sprinted out from the nearby tree line. It was bipedal and double the height of the other men. The thing was certainly humanoid in shape, but this was definitely no primitive hominin. Its marble white flesh glistened in the sun as it ran full force toward the dead animal. The hunters quickly noticed it and scattered, some even leaving behind their stone tools. The figure ran up to the elephant and began eating, tearing the animal's flesh off with its hands. It gorged itself on the meat and suddenly stopped. I laid low in the bush about 100 meters away, eagerly watching in terrified amazement. It was hard to make out details at such a distance, but what I saw next I am certain of. The thing slowly reared its head and looked directly at my direction. I'm not sure if it saw me or not, but I could feel its piercing gaze. The wall of text ended, and Edward and I had to round a slight corner in the room to get to the next section. It was also during this time that he spoke out for the first time. "Do you think this could be real?" he asked gently, almost concerned. "I mean, you saw the strata, there couldn't possibly have been anyone else here for millions of years." "I don't know, Eddie. Let's just keep reading and find out," I answered nonchalantly back, pretending like this didn't deeply unsettle me too. Truth is, I was beginning to get highly unnerved. My initial scientific awe had now shifted into an uncertain angst. The inscriptions continued. "I haven't seen sunlight since the 10th day. That's when I saw them clearly. I had spent that day harvesting fruits and berries alongside the local hominin population. They let me follow them back into their village where we quite literally enjoyed the fruits of our labor. Again, this level of hospitality was wholly unexpected for such a primordial species of human. All was going well, but as it was beginning to get dark, I was frantically ushered out of their encampments. I thought this weird, but decided to shrug it off as a cultural thing if they even had such a concept. Heading back to my cave, the sun was setting on the horizon, and just as I was nearing the mouth of the cave, a looming shadow stretched across the ground in front of me, blocking out the last rays of light from the evening sun. Someone or something was standing high above the rocky outcrop the cave was situated beneath, casting an oppressive shadow. I looked up and saw the dark silhouette of a person. With the bright backdrop of the sunset, it was hard to make out any features, but I could tell that whatever was standing there was not one of the local hominins. When it understood that I had seen it, it began climbing down, scurrying on all fours across the rocky surfaces. Frightened, I hurried inside the cave and quickly grabbed the makeshift door and pushed it into the opening to block it. The door was more like a plug, fashioned out of a large boulder and some wooden sticks and thatch. But before I had sealed the entrance completely, I looked out of the opening one last time, and that's when I laid my eyes clearly on them. There were 4 of them, walking slowly towards the opening from about 10 meters away, now fully upright. The sheer terror I felt at that moment is indescribable. They were all ghastly pale, their flesh smooth and spotless. They stood at probably 2 meters tall, and they had neither any body hair nor any reproductive organs or nipples. The word that comes to mind when describing them is embryonic. They were featureless. Featureless in all aspects except the most harrowing. They, all of them, had my face. They looked like me, hairless, sure, but still nearly identical. The foremost of them opened its mouth and stretched out its hand and said in perfect English, "You don't belong here." That was the last I saw of them before sealing the cave completely. I quickly reinforced the door plug with any rocks and boulders I could find in the cave, and so far it has been effective. I have now been here for God knows how long. I still have enough supplies to last me several days, and enough batteries to continually power my headlamp for at least another day or two, but I hear them, they are outside. They haven't left me ever since that frightful evening. Sometimes they take breaks, but never long enough for me to deem it safe to leave this place. For all I know, it might be a trick to lure me out. It's only a matter of time before they break in. Their cries echo throughout the cavernous walls. This writing will be my only lasting legacy, therefore I hope I have provided sufficient detail to be of some use in some way or another. This is my punishment. These devils, I know what they are. They are my lack of hubris manifest. I foolishly thought the laws of time and space were mine to conquer. However, fate would not allow it, perhaps rightfully so. Oh, how terribly, terribly sorry I am. Patricia, I'm truly sorry. I should have listened. End of text, or well, not quite. The inscriptions continue beyond this, but they were of a different character. I won't reproduce the contents of the last wall, but I can tell you what it consisted of. The blueprints for Bill's machine and a plea to be saved. The power of time was now figuratively in the palm of my hand. I'm not saying I fully believe everything that was written, but on the off chance there may be some truth to it, I choose to keep this DIY recipe a secret. I walked over to the golden ring that adorned the cave floor and picked it up. It too was inscribed described with the initials B and P. I pocketed it and asked Edward, "Where's his skeleton then?" "What do you mean?" he replied. "His bones. If he withered away in this cave, they should have been here." There are some bones here. Over there as well," he said and pointed across the cave. "I know, I saw them, but they don't make for a complete skeleton, do they?" I replied. "I suppose not." Edward acquiesced, aware of the implications. "This place is giving me the creeps." I spoke, suddenly getting an intense surge of paranoia. "What do you say we head back soon?" I whipped out my phone camera and took several pictures of the inscribed walls and artifacts within the cave. Both Eddie and I agreed it was time to head back to assess the situation and where we would go from here. We agreed also not to tell the rest of the excavation crew for the time being. I am sitting inside my tent now, an hour till midnight, and writing up this entry. In the time that passed since leaving the cave, and now I have meticulously examined the photos I took, but I dare not step inside that cave again. Something inside me desperately wants to seal it again, and I regret not doing so as I think we may have committed a grave mistake. About an hour ago, our field assistant Lila came to me in my tent, voicing her concern about something. When she described what had gotten her worried, my blood ran cold. She had asked about why there were concentric circles drawn in the sand all around our encampment. When I heard this, I rushed outside with my flashlight in hand, and I saw them with my own eyes. The whole crew was gathered outside, gawking at the strange markings. In the small crowd of anthropologists and excavators, I locked eyes with Edward, and without speaking a word, I knew what was on his mind. I fear we may have unknowingly unleashed something ancient, but how? There were no passages leading further into a deeper cave system that I could see. It was an enclosed chamber, albeit very dark and with many corners. Could it mean that whatever it is we have unleashed was inside the room with us this entire time? I shudder at the thought. I think it's best I finish up this entry now. There has been an increase in whispers and unrest in the camp this past hour, so I better tend to it and try to get this situation under control. Any tips or advice to make this make sense is appreciated. If what we discovered today really is true, which I am now more inclined to believe, then our common ancestors weren't alone all those millions of years ago, and it might possibly turn out that we aren't either. It was 10:31 when my phone buzzed. Emergency alert, do not enter underground structures such as basements. Stay above ground until the all clear. My husband looked up from his phone and stared at me. Did you just get a... Yeah, that's creepy, I said, glancing at the stairs. Our kid had fallen asleep for the night about an hour ago. What do you think's going on? I don't know, he replied. Could it be like a gas leak, radon or something? We'd had a radon pump in our basement since we moved here. Maybe there was some weird influx of it or something. I ran up the stairs to check on our 5-year-old daughter as Luke flicked on the TV. Grace was sleeping peacefully, her blanket wrapped around her. I made sure she was breathing, comfortable, totally fine before heading back downstairs. When I did, Luke was glued to the TV, which said the same thing. Black screen, pixelated white letters, blocky colors jittering along the top and bottom of the screen. Emergency alert, do not enter underground structures. Maybe we should get out of here, I said, but it's late and Grace has school tomorrow. Yeah, so we'll miss school, we can go to my mom's. Luke crossed his arms and stared at the TV. He then flicked to CNN and other news channels, but whatever was happening here must have been local, because it was just the same political drivel re-airing from earlier in the day. There was not a blip of the emergency alert anywhere except the local news channel. I pulled out my phone and did some Google searches. Nothing came up, so I shot off a text to Lacey, the mom of one of Grace's friends, who lived in the next development over. We'd only lived here since the school year started, so it's not like I had a whole network of people to ask. She didn't respond. I think we should go, I said, grabbing a duffel bag out of the closet. What about work? Don't you work remotely on Mondays anyway? Yeah, but I walked over to our basement door. The chain was latched. I hurried into the kitchen, opened the drawer, and pulled out some postal tape. What are you doing? If it's radon or something, I don't want that stuff all in our house, I said, crouching along the bottom and taping the crack under the door. I think they'd evacuate us if that were the case. I looked up at him as I yanked another long piece of tape off the roll. Okay, so what do you think it is? He shrugged. When I'd taped all the cracks, I brought the duffel bag upstairs, filled it with a few random outfits for me and Grace, along with my laptop and a few of her favorite dolls. Then I grabbed the cooler and loaded our leftover pasta and yogurts into it. Within 10 minutes, I was ready to go out the door. I'll pack up the car. Can you grab Grace? I asked. Luke went upstairs. I walked down the driveway, weighed down with bags. It was a chilly, clear night. Stars twinkled high above me. The street was exceedingly quiet, the tall, scraggly pines of the surrounding pine barrens stretching up to the sky. I heard the echo of a dog barking somewhere. If everyone got the alert, wouldn't there be more people deciding to leave? I glanced at the house across the street. It was completely dark, except for the light above the garage that flicked on when I came out of the house. I opened the back hatch and threw our stuff in. Luke came out after, carrying Grace, wrapped in blankets. She blinked sleepily. I strapped her in, Luke grabbed some stuff, and then we were pulling out of the driveway on the road to my mom's house an hour away. She fell back asleep, I told Luke, watching her face flick into view with the light of the passing street lamps. Good. My phone buzzed. I reached for it. Emergency alert. Your phone's GPS indicates you are leaving city limits. We do not recommend evacuating. Please return home and stay above ground. What the? I whispered. What? Luke asked. There's another alert. It's saying it knows we're leaving. It's tracking our GPS and it's telling us to stay. Luke glanced at my phone. Seriously? Yeah. That data's supposed to be private, he said, isn't it? I would think so, unless, I don't know, maybe there are some emergency protocols that allow the FBI to access it or something. We fell into uncomfortable silence. Luke clicked on the turn signal, switched lanes. You don't want me to turn around, right? He asked quietly. I glanced down at my phone. Number I don't. The highway was empty, not a single car in sight. That made me uneasy. Surely other people would be evacuating unless they were all actually obeying the second message. But who even trusts the government these days? I did another Google search. No results popped up. I refreshed over and over again. Wouldn't something be on the internet by now? We were 5 miles out of town now. I should be relieved. But I wasn't. I leaned against the window, the cold glass pressed against my forehead. The pine trees flashed by, skinny and tilted, then gave way to a charred, barren patch of forest. Both sides of the highway were burnt to the ground. I'd read somewhere that some pine cones only opened in extreme temperatures, like from a wildfire. Fires and regrowth were part of the cycle here, part of the ecosystem, in flux between death and rebirth like a phoenix. My phone buzzed. My heart dropped, but it wasn't an alert. It was a text from Lacey. Only 2 words. What alert? My fingers raced across the screen. Didn't you get an emergency alert saying to stay above ground? Number. Lacey didn't get an alert, I said. Luke paused. What if the alerts were only sent to our phones? I asked, my voice shaking. I glanced back at Grace, still peacefully asleep, head lolling softly with each bump of the car. Luke shook his head. That's crazy. No one can send messages like that, just the government or whatever. What if it's a trap? My voice shook harder. What if the only safe place was our basement? That's just your OCD talking, he said softly, empathetically. We're doing the right thing. There's something weird in town, like a gas leak, and we got out. That's obviously the safest thing to do. I stared out at the charred pines. There were a few that hadn't burned up, standing tall and stilted in the darkness. I stared out at them, wondering why they were spared. One of them moved. What the car screeched to a stop. My body lurched forward, the seatbelt locked, keeping my head from hitting the dash. Sorry, that deer just darted. His voice died in his throat. We both stared at the lower legs of something illuminated in the headlights, thin and spindly, but definitely not a deer's. They ended in twisted toes, not hooves, and extended several feet up into the darkness. Silhouetted against the starry sky, beyond the reach of our headlights, I could see something. Something tall and spindly, skeletal, crisscrossing lines of bones or sticks or something else entirely. As I stared at it, as it stared at me, a wave of dizziness washed through me. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, weight pressed down on my head, and immense pressure bearing down on me. Thwack. Something hit the side of the car with incredible force. The entire car rocked on its wheels. I screamed, thwack. A mess of lines, bones, sticks outside my window, empty air between them, the stars and the pines rippling strangely behind it. Luke stomped down on the accelerator. The car shot forward, we swerved around the thing, then past the burnt section of forest and continued down the dark, twisting highway. My phone buzzed. Emergency alert. All all clear, please return home immediately. We got to my mom's house around midnight, a squat brick ranch on a residential road. I glanced warily at the pines behind her house, stretching up to the sky before picking up Grace and carrying her inside. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table waiting for us, her fingers wrapped against the mug in her hand. The entire house smelled like that familiar mix of coffee and dust. I started for the guest bedroom and then got a better idea. The ranch had a lower level that was half underground. It had been finished into an office, but there was a couch down there. I could have Grace sleep on the couch and we could sleep on the floor. Where are you going? Mom was standing behind me, eyebrow raised as I undid the chain lock to the basement floor. I think we're going to sleep down there. No, you're not. It's all dusty down there. I haven't cleaned for ages. There could even be mice and... We're sleeping down here. Those alerts were probably just a prank, she continued, or a glitch or something. Besides, you're like an hour away now. I'd only told my mom about the alerts. I didn't tell her about the thing in the woods. My mom was not a supernatural person. She'd definitely chalk it up to a trick of the light or something. Casper himself could be floating in front of her face and she'd call it a trick of the light. You're being ridiculous, she continued. You know, this reminds me of that time you taped up the door to the attic, remember? When the exterminator had found a bat up there. You were worried there were more, with rabies, and they could flatten themselves in through the cracks between the door and the ceiling and bite you while you were sleeping. You don't feel the bites when you're sleeping, I growled back. A lot of people have gotten rabies from bats in their houses, and they can squeeze through really tiny places. My point is, she interrupted, it's unsanitary down there. Grace was getting incredibly heavy in my arms. I glanced at Luke, who was just standing in the doorway wide-eyed like he'd walked in on a gunfight. Then I pulled the chain lock and yanked the door open. Kate, Mom said warningly. Halfway down the stairs, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I got Grace settled on the couch, then pulled it out. Emergency alert. Your phone's GPS indicates you have stopped in redacted New Jersey. Disobeying an emergency alert is a federal offense. Please return home and stay above ground. I lifted my phone to show Luke, who was coming down behind me. His face looked ghastly pale in the white light. Mom was right behind him and craned her neck to read the alert too. Oh, that's BS, she said. It's not a federal offense, it's a state offense, and that would be an evacuation order like for a hurricane or something. She shook her head. You know what this sounds like? One of those scammers. I got a call from someone claiming to be my grandson. It's not a scam, Luke interrupted without elaborating. Then he worked in silence, putting the blanket over Grace, getting her comfortable. I flicked on the light and checked for mouse droppings, but I didn't see any. I'll get the rest of our stuff, he said, leaving my mom and I alone. Her expression softened as she looked down at Grace, at her perfectly cherubic little face. Do you need anything else? No, I don't think so. She nodded and went back upstairs. I glanced around. The office stuff was in the leftmost corner, the desk covered with papers and a single photo of my dad. He'd been gone 7 years now, and it seemed like every year more and more of his stuff got tucked away, moved downstairs, shoved into storage. I swallowed down the feeling and glanced around the rest of the room. The door next to the desk led to the unfinished storage area. On the other end of the basement was a sliding glass door that led out into the backyard. I didn't like that at all. We were technically underground where we stood, but the rightmost corner with the door was above ground. Did that mean we were still vulnerable? Those things couldn't fit through a glass door, I thought, but they couldn't fit through a normal door either, and apparently we wouldn't have been safe in our own home. I stared out the glass door, afraid I might see one of them out there. Maybe this was a bad idea to stay here. We were an hour away, sure, but the pines were still right at our door. Not officially the Pine Barrens, but the surrounding Pinelands ecosystem, which was almost the same thing. If those things came from the barrens, they were only in the burned areas, I reminded myself. I imagined a pine cone spiraling in midair, petals opening as fire raged around it, and skeletons made of sticks prying their way out of the thing, creeping along the ground, stretching and growing towards the sky. Were there any maps of the burned areas? I pulled up Google Maps, looking for the blackened areas, but the information would be out of date, wouldn't it? My phone buzzed. I expected another alert, but it was a text from Lacey instead. My friend Rochelle got the same alert you did, BTW, it read. Super weird. My heart dropped. Did Rochelle, whoever she was, listen to it? Tell her not to listen to the alert. I started typing, it's a trap. Then I realized how unhinged that sounded. I didn't even know Lacey that well. I thought for a second, then typed a new message. Can you give me her number? I want to ask her about it. Pretty weird that it targeted both of us, no one else. Sure, let me ask her, was the reply. As I waited, Luke came back down the stairs, carrying our stuff, computer cords and stuffies nearly falling out of his arms. Someone else got the alert, I whispered, one of Lacey's friends. Really? Yeah, I asked for her number. A minute later, the number came in. I dialed it immediately. On the third ring, she picked up. Hello? Hi, this is Kate Lacey's friend. I started awkwardly. We got the emergency alert too, but we think it's a trap. There's something off about it. A pause. But it came from the government, she replied. How could it be a trap? It seems like no one else is getting it. When alerts are sent out like that, they're sent to all the phones in a certain location. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, I don't know, it's weird. Another pause. Well, we were just about to go to bed here, so I'd better go. Wait, I think the basement is safe and everywhere else isn't, I said quickly. I think someone's trying to lure people into staying above ground. Okay, maybe, she said unconvincingly. Look, I gotta go, sorry. A few seconds later, the call ended. Well, crap. She didn't believe me, I said, looking up at Luke, my lip trembling. She and her kids and her family, they're all going to... You tried, he said, wrapping his arms around me. That's the best you can do. I couldn't help it. I cried as we lay a blanket on the floor, got ready to sleep next to Grace. I looked down at her perfect little face, and then Luke and I snuggled under the blankets together. Hey, kiddo. I woke up with a start. For a second, I thought I was in my own bed, but then the roughness of the carpet, the aching in my back, brought me back to reality. My father's voice, rough and warm, lingered from the dream. I could almost feel his arms around me, the summer sunlight beating down on us as we played at the creek behind the house. I rolled over to check on Grace. Her eyes were wide open. She was staring behind me at the sliding glass door. Slowly, she raised a hand and pointed over my shoulder. I turned around. There was something twisting and turning, contorting itself, trying to get in through the sliding glass door like a dog through a cat door. It did it silently, except for a low clicking sound like the popping of joints. All the blood drained from my face. Dark, sinewy legs like spider legs, twisting and turning in the moonlight, squeezing itself ever so slowly through the hole it made. I now saw the shattered glass scattering the floor. I grabbed Luke and shook him. Luke. The thing fell still. I couldn't see eyes or a face, but I felt it in my gut. It was staring at me. Dizziness swept over me. I stumbled forward, losing my balance. It was like I was standing on the deck of a boat. The ground seemed to shift and tilt underneath me. I just wanted to lie down until the world stopped turning. No, I screamed internally. You can't let that thing get Grace. I glanced around the room, looking for something that could be used as a weapon. Anything. Go in there, I said to Grace, pointing to the storage room, or at least I thought I was. Everything was tilting and moving around me. Go, hide. I stumbled forward, but all the colors were bleeding together now. Everything was hazy as a dream. My father was standing in front of me, standing there in the basement, but his face was all wrong. His eye drooped out of his socket, like something had squeezed his skull. His grin was crooked. Hey kiddo, he said in a voice that sounded off-key. Nausea filled me. I started vomiting. Warm liquid down my shirt, splashing on my feet. My dad, not dad, stood tilted, like gravity had suddenly changed. One arm was too long and hung limply from its socket. I miss you so much. Stop, I sobbed. Please stop. Come with me, we can be a family again. Stop. I never got to meet Grace. Wouldn't it be so wonderful for me to finally meet her? The world tilted and shifted. I stared at my father, his left eye drooping like jelly, his crooked smile, his gaunt face, his limp arms. I opened my mouth. Hot pain shot up my shoulder. I fell to my knees instantly. I tried to cry out to say stop again, to tell Grace to run for her life, but all that came out was a scream of pain, and another, and another. When I finally opened my eyes, the world had stopped tilting. Luke was dragging me across the floor, back from the glass door. Grace was peeking out of the storage area, terrified. I touched my shoulder, stinging with pain. My fingers came away red. It bit me. I'm dying. What? My phone began to ring. Shaking all over, I reached into my pocket and pulled it out. It recognized the number. It was Rochelle. You're right, she said breathlessly. No preamble. What? I asked, my voice hoarse. About the alert, my husband, he has some friends who work with cell phones and stuff, and she took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. They traced the signal. It's not coming from the government or the town hall or whatever. I chewed my lip, held my breath. It's coming from the middle of the woods. The hospital was mostly empty, quiet, dark. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the walls were a sickly shade of seafoam green. The doctor, a tall thin man in his 60s, didn't seem to believe my story, but he admitted me for observation anyway. My mom was staying at her friend's house with Grace, in their non-walkout basement. I didn't want to leave her. I wanted her right here with me, but the hospital was above ground, and someone needed to treat my wound before I bled to death. Luke left me for a moment to use the bathroom. I closed my eyes, not intending to sleep, but I was so tired and the bite was now only a dull, throbbing pain. I drifted in and out of consciousness until I heard two voices in the room. I snapped my eyes open for a moment to see the doctor and a nurse hovering over me. They were talking softly to each other, looking concerned. I quickly shut my eyes again, pretending to be asleep. I caught a snatch of their conversation. "It's just like that man," the nurse whispered. "The one that was admitted last night, John something." A pause. "I know. What do you think this is?" "I don't know, Rita. I really don't." "Do you think we should give her diazepam preventatively?" the nurse asked. "The other one, he screamed so much." "The family will ask questions. There's no reason for her to be on diazepam for an animal bite. They'll ask questions when she's dead too," the nurse snapped back. "The least we can do is make her comfortable." "Shh. Oh crap." I didn't open my eyes, but I jumped when the nurse said dead. I now could feel both of them looking at me, their eyes boring through my closed lids. "Let's talk somewhere else," the doctor said. He hurried footsteps on tile, and then nothing. I opened my eyes. I'm going to die. I don't know how long I lay there, wallowing in my own misery, but footsteps jolted me awake. Luke was walking back in. "How's the pain now?" "Bad." I told him what I'd overheard, my voice quavering. "That doesn't mean anything," he said, but I could hear the concern in his voice. "We're going to get out of here and everything's going to go back to normal. The mayor or whatever will release some statement about a faulty alert system and..." "Stop." He looked at me warily, but shut up. The two of us sat in silence. A few times Luke opened his mouth, looking like he was going to say something, but then quickly shut it again. Footsteps pattered by outside in the hallway. The tinny sounds of the TV droned on in the corner. "I'm going to call Rochelle," I told him. The line rang 3 times before she picked up. I told her everything, about the bite, about the things I saw. I was afraid of sounding crazy, but when I'd finally finished, she sounded like she was crying on the other side. "I saw my baby," she said in a low tone, barely above a whisper. I had a miscarriage at 14 weeks, and I saw this little basket with a tiny pink thing bundled up inside, and I heard her cry. Her voice broke. I knew it wasn't real, but I still went toward it, before Ravi pulled me back. "I'm so sorry," I said, the phone trembling in my hands. "Thank you. But it didn't hurt you, right? Bite you, claw you?" "No, I don't think so." The silence stretched out between us. "So what do we do?" I asked. "Just run from it forever?" "I've been talking to someone who knows about this more than we do," she replied. "Maybe I should come see you. What hospital are you at?" She told me she'd be there in an hour. Rochelle was a short, thin woman with brown skin and thick frame glasses. She wore a t-shirt with some sort of video game reference on it and faded jeans. As she hurried in, she was wringing her hands, twisting them over and over again. Following after her was a woman in her 50s. Her salt and pepper hair was cropped short, and her skin was deathly pale, like she'd never seen the sun. "This is Jamie," Rochelle said, gesturing to the older woman. "She's a professor and specializes in this kind of stuff. I've been talking to her for the past few hours and she wanted to see you." "This kind of stuff?" The woman abruptly sat down and leaned in towards me, like I was some kind of specimen she was eager to examine. "You know what's going on here?" I asked as she stared at my shoulder in a way that made me extremely uncomfortable. "Yes, sort of. Have you ever heard of something called speculative evolution?" No, I replied. "Okay, it's reconstructing what kinds of creatures would evolve under different circumstances. Maybe an amphibian would evolve to have wings like a bat, for example, if insects didn't hover around ponds. You see what I mean?" I guess. No. "We also try to construct what animals might look like millions of years from now, or humans. What kind of things will evolve under the pressure of modern humanity, modern technology? There's already some of it happening. The bed bugs in New York City are hundreds of times more resistant to pesticides than the ones in Florida are. Deer are more skittish than they were 10 years ago because cars kept hitting them." Okay, I had no idea where she was going with this. "You haven't seen that image of what humans would look like if they were evolved to survive car crashes? The man has like no neck and lots of fat to cushion the impact." "No." "Okay," she shook her head. "The point is, some people in this field believe that at some point, creatures would evolve abilities that mimic technology, like birds that look like drones, or bats that can sense electromagnetic fields. Who's to say this thing that you and Rochelle have described hasn't evolved the ability to send out radio signals, hack our entire mobile system?" "That's ridiculous," Luke interjected. "So what, this creature's like texting in English?" No, nothing like that. States, local governments, they often have pre-programmed emergency messages, like a protocol for hurricanes, earthquakes, nuclear threats, etc. This thing, it just hacked a signal to send a particular protocol. Same thing with Rachel, she said, looking sympathetically at her. We're all sending little electromagnetic signals in our brains all the time. Neural impulses, sharks, 400 million year old living fossils can detect them. These things, they can hack them. So when I saw my dad, I glanced at Luke. That thing was hacking my brain signals. Jamie nodded. It's a little more complicated than that. I believe this thing sends out a chemical in the air too, at close range, that messes with some neurotransmitters. But essentially, yes. Okay, but why's the basement safe then? Because it's too big to get down there? Luke asked. I'm glad you asked, Jamie replied with a big victorious smile on her face, like she was just about to tell us the secret to the universe. They chose that emergency protocol with the basement because their abilities don't work if you're underground, just how your phone reception goes out when you're underground. A heavy silence filled the room. Luke and I looked at each other. For one, this sounded pretty out there, conspiracy theory level stuff, more unbelievable than Roswell. On the other hand, nothing I'd experienced in the past 24 hours made sense. How do you know all this? I asked. This isn't the first time this has happened, she replied, her face grim. Almost 10 years ago, the same thing happened out by Woodland, on the border of Wharton State Forest. I studied it then too, but there weren't as many of them. Okay, but the text didn't get sent to everyone, Luke said. Only us and Rochelle so far that we know of. Right, so these things, I call them stick men by the way, they only target people with overactive imaginations, people who send out really clear, strong brain signals. It's easier for them to find you, and it's easier for them to hack your brain. They're not actually producing the image you see of your deceased loved ones or whatever. They're just knocking it loose from your memory, from something you've imagined. If you've imagined your kid dying 1,000 times because you have anxiety or OCD, that makes it all the easier for them to use it against you and lure you in. And of course, there's more for them to eat. More for them to eat? Yeah, they eat brains. I mentioned that, didn't I? More awkward, heavy, suffocating silence. Kate said she heard the doctor saying she's going to die, he said in a soft voice. Is that true? Jamie glanced at me but stayed silent. Richella jumped in, her voice full of heartache. Jamie told me once it bites you, it's linked to you, it will follow you and end you. It'll show you your worst nightmares first, Jamie interjected, absolutely unable to read the room. Show you everything you fear. But when it starts showing you yourself in these waking nightmares, that usually means you only have a day left. I swallowed a wave of nausea. Then I started getting out of the hospital bed. I needed to get out of here. Away from Jamie's stare, Luke's concern. Just a moment of silence. Maybe I get a Coke from the vending machine. Not even a diet one. I hadn't had a full sugar one in ages. I tried to keep out the memory of my dad before me in my mom's basement. I had imagined him saying those exact words. When I was at my lowest point years ago, when a flicker of suicide showed itself in an ocean of postpartum depression, and that guy, the stickman or whatever, had used it against me. Another wave of nausea. I pushed towards the door. Wait, Richelle said, standing up, reaching for my arm. I'll be right back, I snapped. I made my way down the empty hospital hallway. Beeping machines, echoey footsteps in the distance. Tears pricked my eyes. I kept going, making a left, then a right, following the signs for the vending machines. My feet shuffled along the ground, taking me there slowly, ever so slowly. Kate, stop. I turned to see Luke coming after me. He stopped 6 feet away, trying to give me space. I just need a minute, I replied, my voice shaky. No, it's not that. Your mom just texted me and we have to go, Grace. His voice broke. My heart broke with it. What happened? She fell, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She's not conscious. They're rushing her to the hospital. To the hospital. You mean here? They're taking her here? I asked frantically. They're taking her to the hospital, he repeated. Something twinged inside me. That doesn't make sense. That's not an answer. I looked down, number on the floor, something black, slick and wet on the green linoleum floor. A tendril like a long umbilical cord attached to Luke's foot and leading down the hallway. I felt dizzy. The world started to tilt. Kate. I turned around to see Luke behind me, frozen, eyes wide. I looked back. Other Luke was no longer standing there. It was me. I was staring at my own face. I wish I could say it looked different, one eye popping out, skin all blistered and pink, but it wasn't. It looked exactly like me, like looking in a mirror. I looked down. Other me was holding a pillow. She held my gaze for a second, then looked down at the floor. I followed her gaze. Grace was lying at my feet, eyes closed, hands resting neatly under her head, fast asleep. No, no, no. I knew this intrusive thought. I knew how it ended. It's not real. It's not real. I turned and ran back down the hallway, reaching for Luke's hand, rustling behind me. I couldn't look back. I couldn't. Luke pulled me into the room and I followed, breathless. We have to get underground. It's here. Richella and Jamie looked at me. Then they looked at the floor. For a second, I thought I was going to see my worst nightmare, but instead I looked down to see blood dripping off my arm, seeping through my shirt, traveling in wet, soaky rivulets, dripping to the floor. Drip, drip, drip. Jamie shot up and walked over to me. Gently, she pushed back the cloth of my shirt, exposing the wound on my shoulder. Necrotic tissue, she whispered. She shook her head sadly. It's begun. I can't die. I can't. My shoulder pulsed with pain. I continued running down the hall towards the big red exit sign. The hospital hadn't released me. Stop. Luke begged, catching up with me, but I forced myself to run faster, despite the pain. I wasn't going to just sit in the hospital room and wait to die. Obviously, from what the doctors said, that's what happened to the last one. I was going to get underground. Maybe I would have to stay there forever, or until they found a way to kill these things. I would not leave Grace without a mother. I wanted more than anything to go to her, hug her, tell her I loved her, but maybe that thing could follow me even into a basement. I didn't think so, but I couldn't risk it. The best thing I could do was get underground, buy time. Grace was as safe as she could be with my mom underground. I ran towards the exit. The red sign glowed brightly in the darkness of the hallway. One of the lights flickered overhead. My bare feet slapped against the floor. The floor felt sharp. I kept running, but it didn't seem like I was getting any closer to the exit sign. What the? I glanced back. Luke wasn't following me anymore, nor Rochelle or Jamie. The hallway extended behind me, stretching back into the darkness infinitely. I kept running. The exit door was open now, still so far away. A stiff breeze blew in, ruffling through my hair. It smelled of pine and wood and decay. Keep running. The ground was so rough under my feet. The air was so cold. The lights above me flickered wildly. The door didn't get any closer, no matter how fast I sprinted. A few leaves swirled by outside in the darkness. Keep running. The lights above me flickered out, and then I wasn't in the hospital anymore. I was in the middle of the woods. Pine trees stretched up into the darkness. The sand littered with sharp sticks and rocks bit into the bare soles of my feet. Silence rang in my ears except for a light fluttering sound somewhere in the darkness. No, it tricked me. I wheeled around. I didn't see any lights, any break in the trees. How deep in the barrens am I? How long have I been running? The darkness closed in, suffocating me. I felt my pockets, no phone, no way to call for help, no way to know where I am. I sucked in a breath, ready to scream into the darkness, but that would draw the stickmen to me, wouldn't it? Or did it not matter? Did they already know where I was? I looked up at the stars, at the slices of sky poking through the pines. I tried to identify them. Is that Cassiopeia? But I didn't know anything about how to tell directions from the stars. Besides, the pines blocked out most of the sky anyway. No, wait, that's not the way to do this. I ran in here. My legs didn't feel that sore, even though it must have distorted time. I'd only felt like I was running for a minute. If I'd run 10 miles into the barrens, I'd know. I just needed to figure out what direction I'd come from. I wheeled around, trying to look for footprints, flattened vegetation, any sign of where I'd come from. But it was pitch dark out, and I didn't have any source of light. There was moonlight, enough to see so that I didn't smack into a tree, but not enough to look for footprints in the sand. I stared at the trees, but the branches were up too high and too thin to support my weight. I couldn't climb them to get a better vantage point. I ransacked my pockets again, nothing. So I started off in a random direction, sticks stabbed at my feet, pebbles rolled underneath my toes. I kept walking forward, trying to keep a straight line. The Pine Barrens is 1,000,000 acres, but an acre wasn't that many square miles. I remembered that from somewhere. I tried to focus on doing the math. If I was in the center and walked in a random direction, how long would it take me to get to the edge? 5 hours? 10? More than that? And of course I'd heard the stories. Even without the stickmen, the Pine Barrens were deadly enough. Carnivorous plants, rattlesnakes, and a way of turning people around. It was easy to get lost in the infinite pines. I thought of Grace, Luke telling her I was gone, her her crying melting down. She needed me. Maybe years ago at that low point in my life right after Grace was born, I wouldn't have been quite so panicked at the thought of dying. But I was panicking now. I picked up the pace. Sticks stabbed at my feet harder. I tried to keep a straight line, but it was so hard in the dark, and for all I knew, I was just walking deeper and deeper into the barrens. Then I saw it. A clearing. My heart soared. That must be where I came from. It was one of the burned areas. The fire had hollowed out a large clearing. It was lit in silver tones by the nearly full moon, no longer obscured. Some pines still stood, completely bare of needles, skeletal and black. Ash blackened the pale sand beneath, the color of bone. A few pine saplings poked through the destruction, only inches tall. It was deathly silent. I'm never gonna get out of here. I looked up at the blackened pines, stretching up to the sky like fingers. Snap. I whirled around. Someone was standing at the edge of the trees, painted in all tones of gray from the moonlight, barely visible among the trees. I took off into a run, but in my panic I tripped. It felt like it was in slow motion. The sandy, ashy ground rose up to meet me. Pain shot up my arms. My shoulders screamed in pain. Sticks scraped my cheek. Snap, snap, snap. I scrambled up to see myself standing there, arms hanging limply at my sides, hair grazing my shoulders. "Let me go," I screamed. My voice echoed and died into the forest. She stepped closer. I could hear too a wet smacking sound. There was another slimy black appendage attached to her feet, controlling her like she was a puppet. She canted her head at me and her lips split into an unnatural grin. I turned and tried to run again. An intense wave of dizziness hit me. The ground tilted, heaviness pressed down on my head. My stomach lurched and I was vomiting, stumbling, tripping in my own puddle of vomit. "Stop," I croaked. I was lying on my back, warm, wet vomit soaking through the back of my shirt. Twisted black appendages were filling up the corners of my vision, melting in with the twisted black pines stretching up to the sky. The stars above me looked like shooting stars, moving across the sky with how dizzy I was. The sky was replaced with my own face. Her hair hung onto my face, sticking to the sweat and the vomit. Her lips curled into a smile, and then her mouth began to open, wider, 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 rows of sharp teeth like a lamprey's descending into the darkness of her throat. I tried to push it off, but my hands met slime. I was pinned by the creature, one of the stick men. It was only her disembodied head hovering over me, attached to a tangled black mess of creature. "They eat brains," Jamie's voice echoed in my head as the teeth loomed closer. So close I couldn't see any of the barrens anymore. Grace. What's she going to do without me? She'll never recover. Her entire life will be ruined. I can't. I'm so sorry. And then I realized the stickmen were attracted to brain signals. What if I'd done something I'd never done before? What if I just stopped thinking? I closed my eyes, ignored the warm, rotting breath on my face, ignored the slime seeping through my shirt, ignored thoughts of Grace. I used every last bit of my willpower to stop thinking. Nothing. A void. Non-existence. A clicking sound came from above me. The creature began to shift its weight. I continued thinking about nothing. Absolutely nothing. The creature pulled itself off me. When I opened an eye, it no longer wore my head. It was twisting and turning, making clicking sounds, lifting some of its appendages in the air, as if confused, as if it thought I'd escaped and it was trying to sense me out again. I lay there in the dark, burnt forest, thinking of nothing for seconds, minutes, hours. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, pushing away thoughts of Grace, of my future, of hers, pushing it all out and being empty. When the sun began to rise, I pulled myself up. The burnt forest was bathed in the pink hues of dawn. My skin was covered in vomit and black slime. My shoulders still throbbed with pain, and there was no sign of the stickmen. It took me another few hours, but in the daylight, I was able to find my way back. After walking around in circles for a while, I caught a glimpse of a road through the trees. I'd apparently fled the hospital and run a half-mile into the pine barrens across the street. Luke and hospital staff were looking for me all night. I was reunited with Grace, and it was the happiest day of my life. I think the stickman is still linked to me. We've been spending our nights in the basement where we've been totally safe. Richelli, Jamie, and I have been working together to figure out how to kill it for good. Some guy online from the incident 10 years ago claims drowning them works. But for now, I am content to be home and be safe, even if it isn't forever and a million bad things are waiting to happen. The man walked in at 2 a.m., dragging something black behind him. The way it moved didn't sit right, neither did he. The receptionist receptionist felt it immediately. It was the way he walked, stiff and uneven, like a scarecrow with one leg shorter than the other. He hid greasy blonde hair beneath a 10-gallon hat, spurs clicking as he moved. I watched the security footage later. His lips were white and thin, his teeth crooked, his mouth twisted into a half smile like he was seconds from laughter. He was dragging a massive black Rottweiler. The dog resisted, back paws sliding across the floor. The camera didn't pick up sound, but later the two gals at reception told me what he said. He's acting possessed. They handed him intake forms. He hobbled back to a bench. I watched through the camera lens as another client holding a cat carrier slid away from him. I looked up his paperwork. The address led to some warehouse out in the scrublands 3 states away. The name seemed fake too. Keaton, no records, no online presence. It didn't seem to fit him, but the dog's name, Mutt. That was the only detail I believed. You might wonder why I checked. It's not standard protocol. I don't usually do this, but the events of the last few nights led me to my search. When he handed the paperwork back, he sat down again, dragging the dog with him like a sack of flour. He leaned against the wall, arms folded, eyes fixed ahead. He moved like a corpse propped upright. His dog didn't move much either. It sat there, waiting. We see a lot of characters here, some aggressive, some kind. But this man, something about him was wrong in a way I can't articulate. I stepped into the lobby to bring him into an exam room. It took him a second to register me, like he was in a trance. And then the smell hit me. Stale cigarettes, gas fumes, and beneath that, something worse. A rotten, greasy stench that clung to the air. The dog sat still, vacant, a husk. It was like someone had lobotomized it. As it stood there, drool began dripping from its mouth, pooling on the floor. I introduced myself and got to work. So, what's going on with Mutt today? Keaton didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted to the ceiling, like he was staring at something that fluttered in the air above us. Oh, he ain't acting right, he ain't been eating much. This is usually where clients start rambling. Some could go on for hours if you let them. He had decided he'd given me enough information. He sat staring at the ceiling through those dirty locks of hair. When I knelt to take the dog's heart rate, the second my fingers touched its skin, a wrongness crawled into me. That tingle before lightning strikes. That creeping dread when something awful is about to happen. The vitals were normal, the heart rate, breathing, but its skin was cold, and its temperature was 97 degrees, lower than we like. I checked its skin, seeing how dehydrated it was, but when I peeled back its loose lips to check its gums, I felt a jolt of unease, like I was too close to something I shouldn't be. The gums were pale, the pupils locked onto me, dilated. That feeling of unease was sickening. "Don't turn your back on him," the man said. I paused mid-turn. "Excuse me?" "If you're gonna walk from him, do it facing. Otherwise, something bad might happen." I exhaled, irritated. He'd watched me get close to the dog, lean in, take its temperature, listen to its heart rate. Yet now was the time he decided to warn me it was aggressive. I liked this situation less and less. The man, the dog. The way this whole situation ached in my gut. I backed away, facing the dog. It watched me like I was prey, like I was meat. A few moments later, our on-site emergency veterinarian, Dr. Harcum, came in. Old school, no nonsense. He and Keaton exchanged few words. The vet recommended blood work and an overnight stay with an IV fluid drip. The dog needed warming up too. Keaton never lost that dumb smile, that half-cocked grin, like something was hilarious, but he nodded, accepted the treatment plan. We went to take the dog into the back treatment area. I slipped a muzzle on, of course, and that's when I noticed how the dog refused to walk. The owner had dragged it behind him earlier, but now it wasn't acting lethargic. I could see in its eyes it was choosing not to move. It was being obstinate. I had a larger male staff member, Ryan, carry the dog for me. As he picked it up, he glanced at me. We didn't exchange words, but I knew he felt it too. Not only the dog. The air itself seemed to hum with an unearthly feeling. When we went to draw blood from its jugular, it didn't even react. Ryan held the dog steady, hands firm on either side of its head, jaws up. The needle slipped in. The syringe filled. The blood felt lukewarm. It didn't feel like it had just been pumping through a live body. I ran it through the machines, and it confirmed mild dehydration, with some elevated lipase values indicating mild pancreatitis. We placed it in a heated kennel, tucked it under blankets, and hooked up the IV catheter. Keaton was gone, but relief was fleeting. Mutt remained, and with him came something unseen. A presence thick as fog, pressing in from all sides. That was 3 days ago. That That night was quiet, rare for an emergency hospital. We had another dog kenneled 2 spaces down from the Rottweiler. It was a cattle dog that had undergone emergency laparotomy. It had been doing fine, normal vitals, good appetite, responsive. 2 hours later, I crossed into the back animal ward to check on it. The cattle dog was dead. It had torn open its own incision. The cone lay discarded. It hadn't just licked or nibbled, it had utterly and completely dismantled itself. Even when coils of intestine unfurled from its abdomen, it kept biting at those guts. The dog had attacked his own innards as if they were coiled vipers waiting to lunge. The dog was in a wet slump, head limp against the floor. The blood ran in bright ribbons, swirling toward the kennel drain behind him. I heard the gentle slurp of the blood sucking down the drain. The kennel was a bloodbath. It streaked the walls, spattered the ceiling. His intestines had leaked a mixture of bile and digested sludge. The cattle dog's eyes were vacant orbs, glistening in the light. I stood still for a moment, taking in the horror, the scope of this violence. And 2 kennels down sat Mutt, eyes focused on my task, no expression on his stoic face. Fluid drip running, heater humming. There was only the sound of the blood in the pipes. Mutt didn't pant, he didn't whine. His eyes reflected the fluorescent light, and for one sickening second, they looked almost human. Dr. Harcum made the call, but I heard every word, every choke sob through the thin walls of our office. The owner didn't cry, they wailed. I'd seen plenty of death in this job, but this was different. This wasn't bad luck. Something else had its hands in this. The mood in the hospital shifted palpably. In all my years, I'd never seen a dog unzip itself like a gym bag and spill out its intestines. His eyes followed every movement, the bloody towels, the mop buckets, the cattle dog-sized body bag, zip-tied and labeled. That night was quiet, but it didn't feel like a break. I imagined I was in a field staring at thunderheads form like warships in the distant sky. That feeling was the promise of something worse to come. At some point, hours after the cattle dog's death, I heard the steady beeping of a monitor from the kennel ward. It was the 4th pump hooked up to Mutt. I didn't want to go over there, but I did. I brought Ryan. We slipped the muzzle over Mutt's head. He didn't resist, didn't flinch. He let it happen. His eyes followed the movement of our hands as we buckled it behind his head. Only his eyes moved. 2 dark orbs. He was digesting the scene around him. It felt like he was learning and listening. The dog had kinked the IV line beneath its paw. We moved it aside, smoothed it out. That should have been it. A simple fix. But as we turned to leave, the light above his kennel flickered. At first, we saw a slight flicker. It was barely noticeable, then it sputtered, dimmed, and cut out completely. The kennel dropped into shadow. Ryan and I froze. The only light now was a faint glow from the hallway behind us. We exchanged a glance. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us wanted to acknowledge what we were feeling. The air in the room changed, heavy, buzzing, like the static before a storm. Then the 2 tube lights above Mutt's kennel flared so bright it hurt to look at them. A pop, then a sizzle, and they died. Everything was silent. Ryan's back was to Mutt. Mutt lunged. It was a surge of violence, even with the muzzle strapped tight. A blur of black as Mutt's body lunged forward. The muzzled face rammed against Ryan's side, smashing into him again and again. Ryan screamed. The dog was silent except for the mechanical snapping of his jaws, working beneath the muzzle. Spittle flying. Ryan twisted, trying to stand, but the sudden attack had taken him off guard. I reacted without thinking, threw open the kennel door. Mutt rammed into Ryan again, harder this time. The sheer force knocked him off balance. Ryan writhed around to grab at Mutt. The moment he faced Mutt, the dog stilled. It stood there motionless, bathed in the new darkness. Something was wrong with this dog, not neurologically. It was something so much deeper. I sensed the calculating intelligence of a predator, but it felt much more malignant than that, like a cancerous tumor spreading quietly beneath the surface of your skin. Ryan and I trembled, shaken to the core. Later, he revealed a bruise under his ribs, a deep bloom of violet spreading like a rose beneath his skin. Neither of us spoke about it. The rest of the night passed without incident. I focused on my other cases for the night. I worked with a Chihuahua hacking through pneumonia, a Persian cat with seizures, and a tabby cat with proprioceptive issues in its forelimbs. I went through the motions, but my mind was elsewhere. Ryan seemed dazed, like something fresh had broken inside of him. It wasn't the shock, or the trauma, or the fear. It was more profound than that. I left for the night still unsettled. Ryan didn't even wave goodbye when I passed by. I chain-smoked cigarettes in my car before driving home, flicked the butts out the window and watched them sail onto the asphalt. My hands were shaking the entire ride, and when I finally collapsed into bed, I pulled my pistol out of my purse and slipped it under my pillow. And as the sun crept over the horizon, my dreams were wrong. I dreamed of a black face snarling in the dark, leaning in, sniffing. glowing, eyes like hollow pits, endless swirling galaxies within. I felt the faraway sting of teeth sinking into my flesh. Not a bite, not an attack, but a slow, deliberate pressure, easing into my skin. When I woke, my sheets were damp with sweat. When I came in for my shift that night, I felt a deep sense of disappointment the second I walked past Mutt's kennel. He was still there, heater purring, eyes following. The lights above his kennel were still blown out. The ones beside them had started to flicker. Ryan called out sick, said he'd been throwing up since the night before. I had a feeling there was more to the story, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. I shot him a text wishing him well. He read it, yet he didn't reply. And that sinister, eerie man who called himself Keaton, his phone went straight to dial tone when we tried calling for a case update. He wasn't coming back. He'd paid half his bill up front in crisp old $100 bills. We weren't getting the other half. The night was busier. I told my manager we shouldn't put any other dogs in that ward, but we didn't have a choice. Our small animal ward was on the other side of the building, but for the larger dogs, they had to go there. We admitted a Great Dane with liver disease. There was nowhere else to put him, so I placed him in the kennel farthest from Mutt, 2 down from the cattle dog that had ripped itself apart. When I went back to check on them 10 minutes later, I stopped cold. Mutt's kennel was wide open. The latch was undone. The door swung open. He wasn't on fluids anymore. Someone must have taken him off. There was no beeping fluid pump, and there was no sign of how the door had opened by itself. This part of the facility was desolate this time of night. Mutt was sitting right at the threshold, slack-jawed and unblinking. I shut the kennel, latched it, and then I left the room. I returned with 2 plates of food. Immediately I felt nauseous. The kennel was wide open again. I hadn't heard a sound, hadn't seen the door move. The only way to unlatch these kennels is with hands, with opposable thumbs. I was certain no one had been back here while I grabbed the cans of food. I slammed it shut again, this time locking it with a makeshift carabiner clip. I slid 1 plate of food under each kennel. I gave low-fat wet food for the Dane and critical care wet food for Mutt. I was walking away when I heard it, a sound that froze me. Not a growl, not a whine. It sounded like someone trying to speak while gargling a mouthful of water, like a deep male voice gargling on words before spitting them out. It was the sound of a dog trying to talk. I turned. Mutt sat there, silent now. Something tingled in the air, a musical conductor guiding along an orchestra, because to my right the Dane had begun to cry. The Dane was the one making these ungodly noises. The Dane's plate of food lay spilled across the kennel floor. His hackles folded back. The Dane backpedaled until its body pressed against the far wall. I watched the Dane's gaze flicker up toward the ceiling. It became immediately apparent to me that the dog was feeling something, a deeply instinctual and inexplicable something. I knew it was feeling that way because I felt it too. When I reached for the kennel door, the crying stopped. The Dane's body trembled, then his whimpering changed. It deepened into a low, eerie sound like a tornado siren, changing in pitch and tone, high to low. Without warning, it stopped altogether. The dog went still, too still, gathering itself back to a normal pose. Then, all at once, the Dane began attacking his own leg. Not chewing, not licking, ripping, breaking. These were deep, pulverizing bites. Bone audibly cracked in the echo of the cavernous hallway. Blood spattered the kennel floor. It wasn't a dog in pain. It wasn't a dog in distress. It was something else. This dog was destroying itself with purpose. I couldn't go in there. If I did, he'd likely redirect this aggression onto me. He would send me to the hospital if I tried to intervene. I turned and ran, shouting for help as I sprinted through the clinic. Dr. Harcum and 2 other techs, Angie and Denise, came rushing out of an exam room, the hallway filling with the sound of my frantic screaming. I grabbed a rabies catch pole and beat them back to the kennels. The Dane was still biting, not a rabid and frothing frenzy, but instead an oddly calm and intentional one. The flesh of its leg hung in shredded tatters, tendon, and the suggestion of bone beneath. Blood spurted like pulsing shots from a water gun in rhythm with its heartbeats. I slipped open the kennel door and looped the catch pole around its neck, tightening it hard. In a wrenching movement, I maneuvered its head enough to stop it from lunging at its own body. It snapped at the air, frantic, without even a hint of pain or emotion behind it. Then it latched onto the metal pole, not out of panic, not out of rage, out of a bizarre corruption of instinct. The sound was unbearable, teeth breaking against metal, splintering, shattering. The flesh of its leg was gone, a ragged mess of meat exposed to the air that flapped as it chewed at the metal. I saw part of a fractured canine fall out of its mouth, mouth. The catchpole was bloody, dented, but holding firm, withstanding each powerful bite directed at it. The dog was weakening by the time Dr. Harkham arrived, slumping over in the drenched puddle of its own blood. By the time we managed to inject a sedative, it was too late. The blood loss was too severe. The Dane collapsed to the floor, body twitching, biting at the air. It wound down like a toy with dying batteries, its eyes glazing over before going limp. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mutt, lips pulled back in a snarl. "When is that dog going to leave?" I snapped, pointing at him. Dr. Harkham shot me a sharp look. Blood streaked his white coat. His eyes were dark, hollowed with an exhaustion brought on long before Mutt entered our lives. "Something is wrong with it," I insisted, "with him. All I see is a dog who mutilated itself in our care and then bled out. Mind you, this is the second one in 2 days. Don't worry about that dog." He gestured at Mutt emphatically. "We have bigger issues here. I have another owner to call. Another person I have to tell their pet killed itself. Under my watch. God, this is a mess." He flicked blood from his fingers, dragged a sleeve across his face. He was years past burnout, a shell of his former self. He couldn't see what I saw. He couldn't see the way Mutt watched, the way his eyes lingered over the carnage pooling beneath my feet, like he was enjoying it. Dr. Harkham sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. "We tried calling that creepy bastard again. Numbers out of service. He ditched the dog on us. That meant we had to rehome it. It could take weeks. I couldn't take weeks with him. None of us could." And as I looked into Angie's eyes, I knew she felt the same. And over the next few hours, the hospital settled into an uneasy silence. The night shift pressed on, but something had shifted. We were all exhausted, hollowed out by what we'd seen. The cattle dog, the Great Dane, the blood. The 2 blood-drenched kennels we'd had to clean up. Mutt still sat in his kennel, untouched food sitting at his feet. The heater hummed in background. 2 more lights flickered out while I cleaned. I mopped blood from the floors, the thick iron scent clinging to my skin. The mess soaking the towels we used was a deep, ugly red. And through it all, Mutt never looked away from us, a shadow looming in the dark part of this corridor. I told myself I'd figure something out, that I needed time, but time wasn't on my side. I was dumping a load of bloody towels into the laundry bin when I heard it. I dropped everything. A voice, thick and wet, slurred in a way no dog's throat was built to produce. It wasn't a bark, it wasn't a growl. It was trying to speak, and what came out wasn't a sound, it was a name. My name. Allison. I turned, stomach lurching. Mutt was sitting in his kennel, still, muzzle slack, drool pooling on the blanket beneath him. His pupils seemed to swallow all the remaining light. I couldn't move. My brain was trying to rationalize it, trying to shove what I had heard into a box of normalcy. Maybe I'd misheard it. Maybe it was the pipes or a monitor. Then the stench of rot hit my nose like a sniff of smelling salts. It was not the usual smell of the hospital, not the faint antiseptic and animal musk that always clung to the air. This was meat left in the sink for weeks. This was something dead wedged into the unseen cracks of the world. It was a volatile and overpowering scent consuming anything else in the room. And I realized then that the smell I'd caught when Keaton first walked into the lobby, that greasy, putrid stench, it hadn't been him, it had been Mutt all along. I felt a desire deep in my core to run, and so I did. I scooped up the blankets off the floor, shoved them into the laundry bin, and bolted. My hand shook as I crammed the lid shut. My pulse was a hammer in my ears. Don't turn your back on it. The memory of Keaton's words crawled down my spine like a cold hand. He's acting possessed. I knew what Mutt had tried to do to Ryan. I knew what he wanted to do to me. And now I knew I wasn't waiting for him to act. I was going to kill him. I kept my head down the rest of the shift, biding my time. My mind wasn't on the cases I took. I worked on autopilot. I went through the motions, but my body was moving without me. And when I got a moment alone, I pulled up 20 milliliters of pentobarbital sodium and phenytoin sodium solution. It's a medication called Euthasol. In other words, it's that sparkling pink liquid we in the veterinary field use to put animals down. I drew up enough of the stuff to kill a dog twice Mutt's size. There'd be a discrepancy in the controlled substance log, but I could smooth it out over the next few weeks. A couple of slightly higher doses given on euthanasia cases. If I logged these with enough time between them, I was confident no one would notice. I locked the cabinet, slid the syringe into my pants pocket. By doing doing this, I was committing a crime, breaking DEA laws. I could lose my license, my career, even end up in jail. But deep in my bones, I knew one thing for certain. That thing in the kennel, whatever it was, it needed to die. The next morning when I arrived for my shift, the hospital was heavy with grief. Everyone was crying because it turned out Ryan was dead. He'd taken his own life in his trailer sometime after leaving work. No details, no explanation. He was there one day, then he was gone the next. The police had come by to inform us. They didn't stay long, didn't need to. I knew then. Ryan's death cemented what I had to do in my mind. I couldn't wait until another dog was placed in those kennels, until another staff member was pushed over the edge. So I worked through the grief, through the horror, pushing it all into a place I'd deal with later. I waited for the right moment, a lull between shift changes when staffing was light. I approached Mutt's kennel. He cocked his head, his eyes tracking my movements. He looked almost expectant. I opened the kennel door and slid the muzzle over his face. My hands moved with a sharpness I hadn't felt before. I yanked the straps too tight, a bit of malice in my actions. My pulse was steady. I held Mutt's paw, feeling for the vein, my other hand already slipping the needle beneath the skin. The syringe in my palm felt hot. I pushed the plunger, forcing the thick pink liquid into his vein. It was a heavy dose, too much for even the largest dog, but I pushed every last drop. Normally, euthanasia is instant. A body slumps, the muscles relax, and life fades like a deep exhale. Their eyes stay open, but they flood with vacancy. Mutt didn't move. His chest still rose and fell in a slow, steady rhythm. His muscles remained locked, rigid. His pupils, wide and black, never left mine. This dose should have ended him. This dog should be dead. The hallway lights flickered. One by one, the bulbs sizzled out, plunging the kennel ward into a profound darkness. The air thickened, heavy with the weight of something unseen. The heater shuddered to a stop. The only glow now came from the exit sign at the far end of the hall, casting a weak green wash over the kennels. The shadows seemed to twist and dance around me. I felt adhered to the spot, unable to move. The door to the kennel slammed shut behind me. My breath hitched. The silence was absolute now, only interspersed with the slow, wet rasp of Mutt's breathing. I could feel him in the dark, the weight of his presence gnawing at the air. The voice came from before me, deep into the churning pool of shadows further back into the kennel. A sound like vocal cords cut like strings and hidden beneath a mound of scar tissue. A broken, misshapen mouth trying to shape words. The vowels stretched, dripping with something slick and inhuman. My stomach lurched. I reached for the latch, fingers fumbling, but my hands were slick with sweat. My breathing was too loud. The darkness pressed in. The rot smell thickened, crawling up my throat. Then I felt it. A cold, dead hand closed around my ankle. I choked on a scream. My body jolted as something gripped me. Those jagged fingernails pressed against the fabric of my scrub pants. The air rippled in an electric wash. The sensation of static snapped against my skin. I turned in a single heaving motion and I ran. The kennel door gave way beneath my shoulder and I burst into the hallway, feet pounding against the tile. Behind me, I heard the kennel door smash open. The sound of paws heavy and fast hitting the ground. He was coming. I sprinted blindly through the dark, running my fingers along the wall as I searched for the end of the hallway. When I reached it, my fingers scraped against the smooth wood. For a time, completely unable to find a knob, a latch, my fingers graced only an endless surface. Paws pounded closer behind me. I swear I heard more than one set of them. It almost sounded like a quiet herd. There was no growling, no snarling, no warning. Just the rush of movement in the dark. A silent freight train barreling toward me. So I spun, pressing my back against the door. The darkness beyond was absolute, thick and suffocating. The emergency exit sign glowed faint above me, swallowing the building in a weak neon glow. The slap of paws on tile stopped, and I saw the faint outline of a hunched beast. A panther crouched behind brush, seeking out its prey. Breathing filled the void, slow, wet, and thick with malice. Then, a whisper of movement so close I felt the air shift around my face. I turned and bolted down the hall. Instinct drove me forwards without thought or plan. My body simply moved on its own accord. I reached my locker, yanked it open, hands scrambling for my purse. The air shifted, a weight pressed close. I felt it before I saw it. A swirling black hole yawning open behind me. My fingers closed around cold metal, the grip of my handgun. I turned and I raised the barrel towards the faint figure I could make out in the darkness, and I fired. The first shot lit up the hall like a camera flash. In that brief flicker, I saw him, that snarling grin. The second shot, the third. His body jerked, but he didn't fall. My ears buzzed with each concussive shot. In the green shimmer of the exit sign, I saw that his lips were still curled back in that awful rictus. The sixth and final shot hit its mark. The left side of his skull caved inward, the muzzle of his face blown apart where the bullet had exited. Even in the thin light, I saw how his jaw sagged open, how that tongue flopped out limp, and even as he fell, his head twitched. A violent, unnatural snap of movement. A thick, wet pop echoed. He swayed, then finally, he collapsed in a heap all at once. I stood there, gun trembling in my hands, ears ringing. The darkness still pulsed around me, thick and heavy, pressing in from all sides. Then footsteps, shouts, voices. Someone grabbed my arm, yanking me back. The lights flickered, buzzed, then flared back to life, and for the first time I saw what I had done. One shot had buried itself in the tile, the rest had hit him. Mutt lay on his side, his head a ruin of blood and bone. His chest rose once, twice, then he went still. The bite muzzle was missing. He must have pulled it off somewhere during the chase. I didn't move. The hospital swarmed with police. I don't know who called them or when, but they arrived fast. A slew of questions. I registered almost nothing in my haze. They took me into the back office, my hands still shaking, my ears still filled with phantom echoes. I knew exactly what I had to say. I knew how to frame it. Self-defense. My uncle Philip was a defense attorney. He talked shop often with me on our fishing trip outings together, so I knew a little more than I let on, and I managed to play my part well, and so the police let me go. We wrapped, bagged, and stuffed Mutt in the freezer, awaiting cremation, and I took time off work, spent a few days in silence, trying to erase the memory of that voice, tried to ignore that palpable sound of my name in some twisted, malformed mouth. As you likely imagined, it didn't work. The phone rang on the morning of my scheduled return to work. It was a blocked number. Part of me knew the call was coming, as irrational as that sounds, and so I answered. Slow, shaky breathing filled the line. Then he began to laugh, like everything that had happened to me was a hilarious joke. Low, drawling, thick with something I couldn't name. Maybe it was a mouthful of tobacco chew. You shouldn't have killed it, little lady. Keaton. His voice slithered through the speaker, curling like a snake around my spine. His laughter built, rising, filling the silence. You've gone and made things so much worse. And as the laughing turned into hollering, the line clicked dead. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, staring up at nothing. His words weighing down the air. Gone and made things so much worse. My first thought was confusion. How did he get my number? My second thought was frantic. Those words struck a chord deep inside my marrow. He said I'd made things worse. And for some reason, deep in the pit of my soul, I believed him. It started with a dog, or rather something wearing a dog's skin. I thought I was doing the right thing when I put it down, but now something far worse is stalking me. I had to clean up a few things first. The worst of it was the youth assault I used on Mutt. On my first day back, I staged an accident. I dropped the bottle and let it shatter across the floor. It complicated the logs, but it worked. I'm not proud of it. You shouldn't be either, but at the time, it felt like the only option. I was wrong. My first day back after a hiatus at home, I noticed that Mutt was still in the freezer. His frozen paws had torn through the tough plastic bag, carving grooves into the ice crystals, growing like miniature spears along the inside of our freezer. I didn't tell anyone his body had moved. That sick feeling rose in my chest again as I stuffed him into 3 more layers of bags. If you aren't familiar with the bags we in the veterinary field use after pets pass away, they're made from high-density polyethylene or polyvinyl chloride. They're tough, thicker than sin. It's uncommon for paws to break through the plastic, but Mutt was never ordinary. I think it was a final screw you. And well, right back at you, Mutt. Since Keaton wasn't picking up the tab, I offered to cover the cremation costs. I wanted those ashes in an urn. For some reason that felt important, something bigger than myself, something I couldn't explain. I didn't feel relieved when they hauled Mutt's body bag away with the 2 other dogs I'm convinced died because of him. I kept hearing Keaton's words ringing in my ears. You've gone and made things so much worse. His southern molasses drawl, mocking, laughing, a sick bastard. The clinic seemed to calm down at first, at least for a couple of days. I began to relax. Angie, my coworker and friend, approached me. Did you hear how Ryan did it? I shook my head quieter than usual, trying to show her I wasn't interested. Part of me blames myself for his death. I know how irrational it sounds, but the human mind is a sinister thing. Grief doesn't care about logic, it only cares about consuming, taking, destroying. She continued, he stabbed himself with a letter opener. My cousin works as a highway patrol officer. He got all the details on it. It's horrible, Allison. He stabbed himself so many times. Please stop, I can't. The tears were already welling in my eyes. She reached out a hand to comfort me, but I brushed past it and locked myself in the bathroom. I spent 10 minutes gripping the sink, struggling to steady my breathing. The rest of the shift passed without incident. It was monotonous and calmer than it had been since I shot Mutt in the hallway. Angie was working a back-to-back double that night, something that had unfortunately become more common in recent years as our clinic struggled with chronic understaffing. They asked if I could cover another shift too, but I said no. After everything I'd seen, everything I'd done, there weren't enough sane pieces of me left to give. That night, I settled into bed, my gun tucked under my pillow. The trailer was quiet, just the sound of wind outside, a high-pitched whooshing that rattled the walls every so often, but I found it almost soothing. As I lay there, closing my eyes, I saw it, a snarling, statuesque black Rottweiler, eyes like two bottomless pits. He moved through the trailer toward me, his presence a creeping weight in the dark. Then I looked down. Instead of paws, he had 4 pale hands, their flesh blending seamlessly into the black fur of his limbs. He strode forward. I couldn't move. Every muscle in my body locked up, frozen in place as he slunk beneath the foot of my bed. I tried to open my eyes to wake up from the nightmare, but they were open, and I wasn't sleeping. A hand rose over the mattress edge, another followed. I felt the weight of them press down, the mattress sinking beneath an unseen force. It felt so real, too real. Then the snout emerged, slow and deliberate, rising above the sheets like a shark breaking the surface of the ocean. It drained the room of anything good, anything right. Only the ache of loneliness remained, a gnawing darkness spreading through me. I felt like I was sinking into a bottomless pit, falling endlessly. The stench of rotten meat filled my nostrils. The grinning maw loomed inches from my lips. Eyes burned into mine, wide and unblinking. A string of drool pressed against the skin of my neck. The mouth began to open, yawning. Each serrated edge gleamed in the moonlight, lining the jaws in jagged, overlapping rows. The clicking of bone filled the silence as the jaw pried open past natural limits, tendons slipping and joints straining. It kept widening, the gaping maw stretching farther than anything human or animal should be able to. Hot, damp breath washed over my face. My teeth clenched, the mouth inched forward, slow and deliberate, savoring the moment. Every nerve in my body screamed to move, to fight, but I was frozen, paralyzed beneath the weight of its presence. The gaping maw hovered inches above my face, the serrated edges of its jaws twitching in anticipation. I could see the glistening sinew stretching as the jaws prepared to snap shut, feeling the unbearable heat of its breath seeping into my skin. A low guttural growl rumbled from deep within its throat, vibrating through the mattress through me. My pulse pounded against my temples, drowning out everything but the sound of that grinding, clicking jaw. Then my phone rang. The sudden chime shattered the moment, a blinding flash of light flooding the room. The weight lifted in an instant. The monstrous shape dissolved like mist, vanishing into the shadows as if it had never been there. I was moving before I realized it, gasping for air, clutching my chest. My heart hammered within me like the hooves of a warhorse, my limbs trembling as I scrambled upright, searching the darkness for any lingering sign that it had truly gone. Had I experienced sleep paralysis, something worse? I heard my trailer door slam shut. I picked up the phone and flicked on the lamp by my bed. I heard a loud wailing siren and the sound of wind on the other line. My eyes were too blurry with tears to read the contact name. Oh, Allison, check the news. It was Dr. Harcum. He sounded out of breath. I grabbed my remote and flicked on the television and thumbed it to a local news station. Dr. Harcum breathed heavy in the background. We are here on the scene of what is now suspected to be an incident of arson. Firefighters struggled to put out the blaze, although they stopped it from spreading to nearby buildings. I felt the world glaze over. I watched a team of yellow-clad firefighters picking through the cinders of my old workplace. God, half the roof was slumped in. The place was licked with flames. I recognized little pieces of a much larger puzzle, smashed and burned. I still clutched the phone to my head as I watched the firefighters pick through the ruins of an intimate part of my life. It was gone, just like Ryan. Angie, she didn't make it out. Dr. Harcum choked out a sob. A man who I'd worked with for years and had never seen shed a tear before began sobbing sobbing on the other line. This was a 60-something ranching vet who didn't take crap from anyone, a man carved out of the New Mexico dirt, tougher than the rest of us, and he was crying. I steeled myself, choking back my tears. Angie had been a friend, closer than Ryan. She'd burned to death in that building. What happened? Tell me everything, I said, forcing down the swell of emotion. I think it was that creepy guy, that blonde guy Keaton. We were working the shift when a container of gasoline with a lit rag was tossed through the back window into the doctor's office. It engulfed the place in flames in seconds. We lost some patients too. His voice wavered, struggling to stay steady. I don't know who would do that. Why? What did we ever do to that inbred piece of crap? So senseless. God, I told the police everything. This was beyond them, beyond what the police could understand. I'd sound insane if I told them everything. Even after I'd blown Mutt's jaw apart, I had omitted so much from my statement. Keaton didn't need a motive. He felt like it was ancient, a force of chaos that existed only to sow pain and reap a harvest of blood. He didn't need a reason, Doc, not to drop off that monster, not to burn down our clinic. He wanted us to suffer. He wanted to watch us die. Dr. Harcum was silent for a moment, my words hitting him like a blow. I have to go, he finally said. The police need a more detailed statement. Be safe, Allison. The line went dead. Another victim. Angie. Gone. Another life swallowed by the plague of tragedy I couldn't begin to understand. My hand trembled, not only from the horror of what I'd experienced, but from the weight of everything I'd lost. From the thought of Ryan's brutal self-destruction. Some creeping apocalypse had wandered into my life, and it was clear now it intended to stay. I couldn't sleep again. I didn't even try. My phone buzzed with texts from friends, family. One missed call stood out. My old friend Joe. Navajo Joe we used to call him, always with a grin. He just laughed, that handsome, tough son of a gun. I should have called them all back immediately, but I had other more pressing things to do first. I gathered my belongings, flipped open the cylinder of my revolver, and loaded a cartridge into each chamber. The compact 9mm felt solid in my grip, its matte finish worn smooth from years of use. Despite its small frame, the steel carried weight, reassuring and steady. I tossed a couple of ammo boxes into my purse, the rounds light but lethal, their copper-jacketed tips catching the dim glow of my bedside lamp. From the top of my cabinets, I pulled down an old wooden cigar box. Inside was a couple $1,000s I'd stashed away for emergencies. If this wasn't an emergency, I didn't know what was. I sat on the porch of my trailer, a cigarette pinched between my fingers, watching the sun claw its way over the horizon. Smoke curled into the air, twisting in the breeze, vanishing into nothing. By the time morning fully arrived, I'd burned through the whole pack. I checked my watch. The crematorium would be opening soon. They'd taken Mutt's body a couple of days ago. I needed to convince them to put Mutt at the top of the cremation list. My old Buick truck started with a low rumble, the engine purring to life. A gift from my late father, it had been his pride and joy. I reached up to adjust the rearview mirror and froze. A spiked black collar hung from it, tags jingling softly as I brushed against them. Mutt. And below it, Keaton's number. I recognized it immediately. The same one we tried calling at the clinic when he abandoned that thing on us. Not a dog, a thing. Where my fingers touched the collar, a biting chill crackled against my skin, like dry ice burning on contact. I rolled down the window and flung it into the scrub brush. It didn't make me feel any better. He had gotten it back. I had placed it in the cremation bag with Mutt, but somehow it was here, which meant he'd been here, inside my car, inside my home. Maybe that thing in my trailer hadn't been Mutt at all. Maybe it had been Keaton. Mutt was just the beginning, and this was spiraling into a situation I couldn't contain, at least not alone. I pulled out of my small patch of land, kicking up a flurry of red dust. My air conditioner hummed. My fingers drummed against the steering wheel. 30 minutes later, I pulled up to the animal crematorium, a sunken gray cement building casting a wide shadow in the heat haze. I stepped out and tried the door handles. Locked. I pressed the doorbell and heard a faint jingle inside, but the lights were off. I checked my phone and swore under my breath. I'd been so lost in my own thoughts I'd completely forgotten it was a federal holiday. No one was inside. Veterinary clinics contract with crematoriums, sending euthanized pets in sealed black bags. We store them in freezers until the company's van arrives to collect them. They're packed alongside animals from other clinics, then stored in even larger freezers at the crematorium until it's their turn for processing. It can take weeks to complete a cremation, but Mutt had only been here for a few days, and somehow I could feel him inside the building, like I was standing too close to a live wire. The offshoot road I'd followed was empty. In the distance, I could see the glimmer of traffic, but it was far enough away that no one would witness what I was about to do. I circled circled the building, checking for an alarm system. Nothing. Peering through the windows, I scanned the interior. No cameras either. Crematoriums aren't exactly prime targets for thieves. Nothing to protect except frozen animal corpses. At the back, I found a window. Above me, only miles of empty blue sky, the air still except for a faint breeze curling through the scrub. I crouched and picked up a stone the size of my palm from its resting place beside a cactus, weighing it in my hand. Then I hurled it through the glass. The window shattered unevenly, jagged shards left clinging to the frame like teeth. I found a stick nearby and used it to knock away the worst of them before pulling myself up and climbing through. Glass crunched beneath my boots as I landed inside. The rock I'd thrown had skittered across the floor, coming to rest far across the room. The space before me stretched out like a cavernous warehouse. To my left, 4 massive crematorium units, metal doors dull in the dim light. To my right, an entire wall of freezer units stood silent and still. Steel girders loomed overhead, casting long, skeletal shadows against the walls. It felt like I had walked into a place I wasn't meant to be, like intruding in a place that had been waiting for me. The silence wrapped around me, thick and uncertain. My heartbeat thumped against my ribs, steady but insistent, like a distant war drum. Behind me, the wind whistled through the broken window. Then the smell hit me. The thick, sickly stench of rot, like a corpse left too long in the sun, its hollowed skin splitting open, brimming with writhing black flies. The air crackled with the sound of unseen maggots popping and shifting. A sudden thump made me jerk toward the freezers. One of the lids lifted, then fell with a hollow clunk. I watched, my breath caught in my throat as the white top rose and dropped again, like a mouth opening and closing. Then another freezer began knocking against itself, and another. Then they all started. The sound grew into a chaotic, discordant symphony. The freezers shuddered, vibrating against the floor, scraping and twisting from their original positions. Then, all at once, the room fell still. Silence dawned. Then, with a deafening crash, the first freezer that had started thumping was hurled 10 feet across the floor. It flipped onto its side, metal screeching as it scraped across the concrete, body bags spilling from the burst seam. It slammed into one of the crematorium units, the impact tearing the freezer door clean off. The lid skidded across the floor, crashing into the wall with a metallic clang. And in the middle of the wreckage lay the triple-bag corpse I recognized all too well, Mutt. His body was rigid, frozen stiff inside the thick layers of plastic. The paws pressed outward, twitching. I heard bones grinding, joints twisting, the sickening sound of something forcing itself to move when it shouldn't. The stiff limbs pushed against the plastic like a baby kicking from inside the womb. I felt eyes on me, burning pupils watching from behind. Shadows stretched and shifted in my periphery, but I couldn't take my gaze off the thing in front of me. The dog I had shot, the one with the caved-in skull, the one I had pumped full of euthanasia solution, the one that had been locked in a freezer for days. I spotted a square point shovel leaning against one of the cremation units, caked in ash. I grabbed it, feeling the rough handle bite into my palm, and charged forward. I swung it down with all the force I could muster. The first strike split the thick plastic, sending frozen chunks of flesh spraying across the floor. Mutt's ruined head tumbled free. His frost-glazed eyes caught the dim light, and his shattered lower jaw smacked against the concrete, twitching. It was too frozen to bite, too stiff to do anything but thrash in mindless, spasmodic movements. My pulse thundered in my ears. The wind outside howled through the broken window, its pitch rising into something shrill, almost human. The shadows behind me deepened. I swung again. The shovel blade carved through tendons, severing the spine at the neck. The paws inside the torn body bag spasmed, clawing at nothing. I kept going, hacking away at the frozen flesh until the head detached completely with a final sickening crunch. The wind howled louder, but I could sense that it wasn't only the wind behind me anymore. I turned. Keaton. He loomed in the broken window, impossibly tall, his body twisted to fit through the jagged frame. One hand gripped the windowsill, fingers digging into the crumbling concrete, the other obscured in the shadows. His filthy blonde hair hung limp over a face that wasn't quite human. His neck stretched forward, grotesquely elongated, the vertebrae bulging beneath thin, sallow skin. It didn't just extend, it coiled, folding over itself like an accordion, fluid yet wrong in every conceivable way. The angle of it made my stomach twist. His eyes were red, raw, pools of blood where the whites should have been, and they pinned me in place. The pupils were black, dull, the color of tarnished coins left to rot in the dirt. He inhaled, slow and deep, dragging in the air like he was tasting it, and then his lips split apart, curling into a grin that stretched too wide, splitting cheek to cheek as if his skin could barely contain it. His chest heaved, a silent laugh rippling through him, and his head, God, his head was so much closer than it should should have been. His clicking, sinuous neck had stretched impossibly far into the room, casting a long, warped shadow that swallowed the space between us. Mutt's body writhed behind me, flopping against the concrete like a fish without a head. The sickening smacks echoed through the cavernous room, each one more desperate, more wrong. I backed away from Keaton, slow and deliberate, my pulse hammering in my ears. He didn't speak, he just breathed deep and slow, savoring the moment, drinking in my fear like it was red wine. The wind whispered through the broken window, stirring the air between us. Then his other arm rose, unnatural in its movement, the elbow joint clicking as it bent at a disturbing angle. His hand curled around something, lifting it up like a prize. At first I couldn't make sense of it, a dark matted thing, limp and swaying slightly. Then I saw how his fingers had sunk into it. His middle and ring fingers were buried deep in gaping eye sockets. His thumb screwed into the crown of the head like he was gripping a bowling ball. The realization hit me like the blare of a car horn on a pitch black road. Ahead, a human head. The jaw hung slack, twisting from side to side with every minute shift of Keaton's grip. Blood clung to the torn skin in slick, wet strands. I knew that face. Dr. Harkham. The breath hitched in my throat and I staggered back without thinking. A mistake. White-hot pain seared through my calf. A vice clamped down on my leg. My brain scrambled to catch up with what had just happened. I looked down. Mutt's severed head clamped onto my ankle, his mangled jaw locking in place. Torn flesh barely held the structure together, but the grip was unrelenting, teeth buried deep. Pain flared through my leg, hot and immediate, the pressure tightening like a rusted bear trap. Keaton laughed. The sound curdled the air, high-pitched and jagged, warbling between something human and something that had never been. His entire body quivered with the force of it, his grotesquely long neck arching like a bridge, vertebrae rippling beneath stretched, paper-thin skin. The ridges of his spine pressed outward, shifting unnaturally, jutting like knuckles ready to crack. I swung the shovel down on Mutt's head, the impact shuddering through my arms. His jaws only clamped tighter, and I felt a fresh rush of warmth as blood trickled into my boot. Gritting my teeth, I pried at the head like opening a clamshell, peeling it from my leg. It took a strip of fabric and flesh with it as it crashed to the floor. Snarling, I wedged the shovel between its upper and lower jaw, pressing down with my full weight. Bone splintered, the jaw cracking apart with a sickening pop as the lower half disconnected completely. Keaton howled with laughter. It was a riot to him. He shook with it, body convulsing, that awful neck writhing like a snake. I swung the shovel sideways, aiming straight for his grinning face. But before it could land, his neck snapped back, recoiling too fast, retreating into the night. The shovel flew from my hands, clattering against the wall with a metallic clang. He lingered in the window, looming, watching, waiting. Shouldn't have killed it. You started something you can't finish, little miss. Should have let it feed until it was done. Then I'd have picked it up. His voice rasped like a snake's hiss, slithering into the space between us. His head retracted, impossibly smooth, that too long neck drawing back into the night. His hand peeled from the windowsill, talons scraping against the concrete, leaving behind deep gouges in the stone. Behind me, the thrashing body stilled, silence settled, thick and suffocating. I didn't dare turn around, not yet. I braced myself, waiting for the inevitable, for Keaton to slip back in through some unseen opening, to drive those jagged fingernails into my spine, to tear into me with his yellowed animalistic teeth. But nothing came. My breath left me in a shudder. My body screamed for me to move, but the lingering presence of him made my muscles coil tight, every nerve waiting for the strike that never landed. Finally, I forced myself to turn. Mutt's body lay still. Whatever had been animating it, twisting it into something beyond death, was gone now. For good, I hoped. I limped toward the nearest cremation retort, my leg throbbing with every step. My hands trembled as I fidgeted with the loading door. It clunked open, the hinges groaning, and I slid the roller tray out. Mutt's head went in first, his detached lower jaw following. His body came next, heavier than it should have been, dead weight sinking into the metal. The pain in my leg flared, sending hot sparks of agony shooting up my thigh, but I bit down against the pain and shoved him all the way inside. Fumbling with the control panel, I pressed the buttons, praying I got the right sequence. The burners roared to life, the chamber flickering with searing orange light. Heat pulsed outward, warming my skin as the fire licked at the corpse. I staggered away, limbs shaking, and made my way to the office break room. The drawers rattled as I tore them open, my hands shaking too much to be precise. Gauze, scissors, bandages. I grabbed everything I could, then hobbled back to the retort. Collapsing beside it, I pried off my boot, wincing as blood dribbled onto the floor. The sock beneath was soaked, the fabric clinging to my skin. I exhaled deeply, then reached for the scissors, snipping my pant leg above the wound before peeling it away. The damage was worse than I thought. Blood pooled in the puncture wounds, the torn flesh already darkening with bruises that spread outward like shock waves from each ragged tear. My calf throbbed in time with my pulse, sharp bursts of pain radiating up my leg. The bites might have been deep enough for stitches, but I didn't have time for that. The jeans had saved me from the worst of it, though the shredded fabric clung to my skin, soaked through. I pressed gauze against the wounds, wincing as fresh blood welled against the white cotton. I wrapped a compression bandage around my leg, tight enough to slow the bleeding but not enough to cut circulation. Antibiotics or lidocaine would have been a blessing. I could have stitched it myself if I had to, but a crematorium didn't exactly keep medical supplies on hand. I leaned my head back against the wall, exhaling through clenched teeth. My ears rang from the heat, the exhaustion, the pain. And then I heard it, a scream, distant, warped, twisting through the air like the high-pitched wail of logs splitting in a fire. I turned toward the retort viewing window. Inside, Mutt's body writhed as the flames engulfed him. The hairs curled first, blackening before catching fire, the flesh peeling away in layers. His limbs twitched, shuddering, the last vestiges of unnatural life refusing to die easily. The stench of burning fur and charred meat turned my stomach. I forced myself to watch as the thing that had haunted me was reduced to nothing more than a skeletal frame. Eventually, there was nothing left but black soot clinking to the glass. The steady hum of the cremation unit filled the room. I let the heat seep into my bones before finally pushing myself upright, limping toward the control panel to shut everything down. By the time the retort had cooled enough to retrieve the remains, the sun was sinking below the horizon, the sky smeared with a hue like burnt orange. Keaton hadn't come back, yet. I grabbed a shovel and a garbage bag. The retort door groaned open, and I scooped out the calcined bones, brushing away the brittle black remnants until all that remained was pale dust. One by one, I fed the remains into the cremulator. The machine whirred, grinding the fragments down until every last piece of mutt fit into a bag just slightly larger than my hand. I stood there for a long time, gripping the bag in my blood-stained hands. Keaton had slunk away into the night, but I knew this wasn't over. I thought about Ryan, Angie, the dogs, my clinic, reduced to nothing but cinders and ruin. I'd lost so much in just a few weeks. Too much. Half my life was gone in an instant. I felt too hollowed out to even cry. Ripped out of my life in an instant, no rhyme or reason to it. He could have killed me, easily. He was toying with me like a cat slapping around a finch with a broken wing, each swipe landing harder than the last. Soon, I reckoned he'd start biting. I gritted through the pain as I pushed the freezer back into place, the weight of it straining against my injured leg. Plugging it back in, I reloaded it with black body bags, setting the torn-off lid back on top like a makeshift seal. The air reeked of blood and freezer burn, and of the dust blowing in from outside. I found a broom and a mop, doing what I could to clean up my blood and mutts, which had thawed into a dark, congealing slick on the floor. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Stepping outside, I checked both ways. Nothing but dirt and desert weeds stretching into the distance. The silence out here wasn't comforting. It was heavy, pressing down like a held breath. The dread never left. Sliding into my car, I turned the key. The engine rumbled to life, a sound that grounded me, if only for a moment. I set Mutt's bag of ashes on the passenger seat, staring at it like it might start moving again. Then I saw something in the footwell, something round, hollow sockets where fingers had pressed deep and firm. Dr. Harcum's head, a parting gift. Bile rose in my throat, but I swallowed it back, forcing my breathing steady. I'd had a tough life growing up. I knew how to push things down, bury them deep. I grabbed an old jacket from the back seat and tossed it over the round heap. At least I didn't have to look at him like that anymore. Then I did the only thing I could do. I called the one person who might be able to do something about this. The only one who might be able to pull me from the riptide I was drowning in. Joe. My buddy from high school. I hadn't talked to him in years, but I'd missed his call this morning. That had to mean something. The dirt road stretched toward the main highway as I drove, my hands gripping the wheel tighter than they needed to. He picked up on the second ring. Allison, thank God. Tears welled at the corners of my eyes. God, Joe, it's been so long. I saw the news. I know you worked there. I had to see if you were okay. Joe, I need to talk to you. Something's after me. It's been after me since I first saw it a few weeks ago. I need your help. A dog came into my clinic. Bad luck. Thing turned the building into a slaughterhouse without so much as a blink. Silence. The joy in his voice faded, melted away like chocolate left too long in the sun. Outside, the sky burned with the last light of day, the sun dipping toward the edge of the world, flaring one final orange goodbye. That's not just bad luck, Allison. That's something else. Something old. That's bad medicine. Joe clicked his tongue the same way he used to. The sound hit something deep in my chest, a crack in my ribs I hadn't noticed forming until now. I should have called him sooner. Maybe things would have turned out differently, maybe not. You got my address. Come down to the res. I'll make sure they let you in. His voice was steady, familiar, safe. He gave me directions, the Navajo reservation a couple hours to the southwest. I've got some ashes too, I said. My fingers tightened around the small bag beside me. I cremated his dog, the one he brought into my clinic before all this crap went south. Joe went quiet for a moment, then softer this time. Not a dog. He didn't elaborate. Not anymore. A sharp, blistering pain grabbed my calf. I sucked in a breath, my legs shivering, nerves screaming as if a white-hot blade had been pressed into my skin. I yelped. Allison, Joe's voice sharpened. The pain spread like fire, radiating from the bite wound, sinking deep. My pulse hammered as I clutched my leg, fingers pressing into the fabric of my jeans. But nothing stopped the burning. Then, from the darkness of the footwell, something shifted. A wet, gurgling croak, a jaw working. I froze. Joe must have heard it too. His breath hitched sharp over the line. A slithering rasp clawed up from beneath the jacket I'd tossed over the thing in the footwell. The sound of dry lips parting, of a raspy voice speaking through a mouth that shouldn't be able to talk anymore. His voice. My breath stilled inside me. A hollow, empty space opened in my chest. Keaton. He was talking through lips that didn't belong to him. Lips that once belonged to Dr. Harkham. The weight of his amusement pressed down on me, thick and choking. A grin curled in the dark, unseen but felt. The voice slithered through, dripping with something close to excitement beneath the folds of my jacket on the floor. Slightly muffled but clear enough to hear. I'm really starting to enjoy this game. I drove away from that animal crematorium in a blaze of rubber. No other cars were outside, so I have no idea how Keaton had gotten there. Did he walk? I never heard a car idling or an engine starting up. The sun had set, and that made me feel a deep, seething sense of unease, like the miles of surrounding red rock and highway were out to get me, out to hurt me. Dr. Harkham's head still rolled around beneath my jacket, but the ventriloquism act had stopped. I should have tossed him out into the desert, but that didn't feel right. A man who I'd worked with and grown to care about. He had a temper, but so did I. That's why we meshed. God, his poor wife, his poor kids. I felt like Joe might know what to do with the severed head sitting in my passenger footwell. Joe had tried to call back, but I didn't pick up. I had a sneaking suspicion that Keaton was listening through Dr. Harkham's ears. I drove along a cut of dusty road for almost an hour before I saw a rest stop. I saw the needle crawling towards empty on my gas gauge. I didn't want to stop, but I had no choice if I wanted to make it to the res. I pulled off the highway and saw an old pump stop that was desolate. A single produce semi-truck sat in the parking lot near the diesel pumps. The overhang lights looked like an oasis in a sea of dull black pitch. I settled into a pump and tossed a few more items of clothing down on top of where Dr. Harkham's head stayed. I heard a low chuffing sound beneath the layers of fabric. I ignored it. I needed to focus, to observe my surroundings. I stuffed Mutt's ashes into my purse alongside my pistol. I passed by a grizzled, overweight trucker sitting in his driver's seat, watching me cross the sidewalk. I wandered into the gas station and grabbed an assortment of jerkies, energy drink cans, and a steaming cup of coffee. Not road trip snacks, just things to keep me alive, thinking through the night, to keep me surviving until dawn. A scrawny, early 20-something burnout sat with his feet resting up on the countertop. I could hear the sound of a movie playing through his phone speakers. He casually ate away at a bag of popcorn. The coffee tasted burnt, metallic. The lights flickered overhead like they weren't sure they wanted to be on. 40 on pump 6, I said, sliding my assortment of items across the counter. He didn't say a word, just clicked away at the register with a hand absent-mindedly. I slipped him a handful of 20s and he tore his eyes from the phone long enough to pour change into my hand. I left without a word. I crossed crossed below the blanket of light cast by the overhang shining down on pumps. I stopped walking when I turned over and saw that the semi-truck was empty. A wrongness crashed down around me, an all-encompassing feeling of doom. I surrendered to the feeling. I didn't walk towards the truck, didn't go to investigate. I had an idea that's what Keaton wanted me to do, what he was waiting for me to do. I kept my eye on the semi's cab, inching backwards with a bag in one hand, a coffee in the other, purse slung over one shoulder. My breath sounded pitched in the darkness, labored and heavy. I saw a glimmer of red across the inside of the semi's windshield, a glistening brushstroke. I didn't peel my eyes from the semi as I filled up my tank. As soon as I was done, I slid into my truck and started it up. The click of the locks engaging brought little to dissuade the rising tide of panic drowning me from the inside out. As I pulled around the pumps and across from the station, I saw the right side of the semi in the flash of my headlights. The cab driver's side door was cracked open, blood flung in congealed globs on black asphalt. I saw him then, Keaton. He was perched between the semi's wheels like a spider hiding beneath a rock, his limbs like long wooden posts stretched with a thin layer of white skin, pinched feet held onto the underside of the truck bed in a broken contortion, his elbows buckled in the wrong directions. Everything was so much longer than they should have been, neck like a tangled twisting vine. His eyes refracted the light like two glowing yellow orbs. The bite wound on my leg began to itch, then burn. I saw thin fingers of smoke clawing out of my purse, and I pulled out the warm ashes of mud and set them on the passenger seat. I heard a faint crackle like embers in those ashes. The car began to smell like singed hair and cooking flesh. I noticed a sharp smile on Keaton's face, his mouth drenched in rivulets of blood. The trucker sitting in his cab earlier lay in a twisted heap beneath Keaton. The trucker's rib cage was cracked open like a crab shell. One of Keaton's sharp hands was digging around inside the man like a woman digging around inside her purse for her keys. Keaton's stare lingered, piercing as I swung my car around, kicking up a shiver of dust, and I flipped my truck into a higher gear. Keaton pulled a dripping red hand out of the trucker's sucking chest cavity and began waving at me, a friendly hello. I revved up the engine, blowing down that road back onto the highway faster than I should have. It wasn't until a few minutes later that I remembered the cashier, sitting alone at his post, unaware of the broken thing feasting just outside his doors. God, I hope it didn't come after him next. I thought about calling the police, I really did. But God, I had a severed head in my car. I couldn't get involved with the police. They'd have asked for info I simply couldn't provide. The head of Dr. Harkham was letting out a low drone in the footwell as I tore forward down the highway. I sipped the coffee as the mile markers slipped past, the hum of the highway loud in the quiet. The head in the footwell let out a faint groan under the jacket. I hit Joe's name on my screen and waited. He picked up on the second ring. Allison, he said, "You still breathing?" "Barely," I said. "I can't talk long and I can't say much, not out loud." A beat of silence. "It's with you." Not him, but it's listening. "I brought something I probably shouldn't have. I think it hears through it." "All right," Joe said, calm but clipped. "Just talk around it. I can follow." "I'm heading your way. Should hit the basin in a couple hours, give or take." "We're setting up now," he said. "Called in a medicine man named Despa. He knows that old stuff. Said what you told me last time was a bad shadow. Said that thing you shot might have been a mask, not a real dog." "It wasn't a dog," I said, my voice wavering just a hint. Joe exhaled through his nose. I could picture him standing outside his truck, wind tugging at his sleeves, oiled gator skin boots kicking at the weeds. "We set the line near the arroyos. You'll see it before the road curves west. Cedar, ash, pollen. Despa's been blessing it himself. That thing steps through, it'll feel it, might even stop it. I'll drive through, I'll lead it in." He paused. "You sure it's still behind you?" "No," I said. "I'm not sure of anything, except it's not done with me." His voice dropped. "Allison, if that doesn't work, we've got a backup plan. If it follows past the ridge, lead it to the trailer up on the hill. It's mine. Go in, make sure it follows, then slip out the bathroom window and shut it behind you. Locks from the outside. You won't see anyone, but we'll be in position. My cousins are posted nearby. Despa will be with us." Good. Another silence passed between us, the kind that holds everything neither of us wanted to say. "I don't know what this thing is, Joe," I said finally, "but it's not a man, not anymore." "I figured that much." "I hate that I'm leading you into this, Joe." He chuckled. "I'd do anything for you, Allie. Just hate it took something this awful for us to reconnect." I winced. I should have reached out sooner, but time has a way of slipping through your fingers. "You sure your people are ready for this?" No one's ready for something like that, but we've dealt with worse than dogs wearing skin. Joe, I felt a tear streak down my cheek. For the first time, it wasn't an unkindly shed tear. I know, just get here, we'll take care of it. I stared at the horizon where the last light had slipped away hours ago. The jacket in the footwell twitched and a low, warbling breath rattled through the fabric. Listening, clicking teeth together. Soon, I said, just keep the fire burning. I hung up. The road stretched on for miles. I fought the pull of sleep, guzzling caffeine and chewing jerky to stay alert. I was flying toward a violent conclusion. Keaton felt drawn to me, like I was his muse and he the artist. Maybe it was because I killed Mutt, maybe something deeper, some unseen thread tying us together. He killed my friends and co-workers, he beheaded the vet I worked for, burned down the clinic, even murdered a trucker just to send me a message. This was more than cruelty. This was personal. A few miles out from the res, I saw a wash of blue and red lights behind me, followed by the chirp of a police siren. If my sanity were a spool of thread, it was unraveling fast. This night felt like a nightmare unfolding slowly, like a dress billowing on a clothesline. I pulled calmly to the side of the highway, though my heart thundered in my chest. I kept my hands on the steering wheel and stared into the rearview mirror. The officer approached from the right, walking the shoulder with caution. He came to the passenger window and motioned for me to roll it down. I did. License and registration, please, he said in an authoritative tone. Yes, 1 second, officer. My eyes dropped to the bundle of clothes on the floor, and I forced myself to look back up at the glove box. I pulled out some crumpled insurance paperwork and my registration, then grabbed my license from my purse and handed them all over. His face stayed blank, maybe a little annoyed. He had just started walking back to his cruiser when Dr. Harcum's head began to moan, a low, drawn-out sound that grew into a wail. My heart stopped. The mood shifted instantly. The officer turned, clicked on his flashlight, and swept the beam across the truck's interior. What is that noise? He asked, flashing the light across the dash, the seats, the floor. The beam settled on the lump in the passenger footwell. He reached down with a gloved hand. No, don't, please, I said, my voice cracking, panic blooming fast. If he found the head, Keaton would be the least of my problems. Be quiet, ma'am, he snapped. With 2 fingers, he peeled back the jackets, the dirty shirts, and the jeans. He gasped when he saw the head, eyeless, crusted in dried blood, the flesh writhing slightly, twitching on the floorboard. The head wailed louder now, 2 black, empty sockets staring up at him. Oh Lord have mercy, what the hell is this? His tone shifted again, this time to fury. Ma'am, step out of the vehicle now. I reached for my door handle and heard him unholster his sidearm with a sharp pop. His flashlight lit up the cabin like a searchlight, held steady in his left hand. In his right, he raised a sleek black pistol, his gloved fingers wrapped tight around the grip. Do you have any weapons in the car? I have my revolver in the purse, nothing else. Officer, please listen to me. Shut it, he snapped. Hands laced behind your head, kneeled down in front of the car. No other cars passed by. Besides the wind, it was too quiet. The air shifted, bad air, a bad omen. It smelled like dust, but beneath it was something fouler. The reek of decay swam through the midnight breeze. The scrubland stretched for miles behind barbed wire fences. The officer reached for his radio but paused, listening. A low howl rose from the distance. A coyote drowning in a river, a wolf caught in a trap. It was a sound full of pain, too close, and the air around us vibrated with something uncanny. I had moved in front of the truck, obeying his commands. My feet moved without thought. I had always been pliable under authority, never one to break rules. The bushes rustled behind the officer, off to the right beyond the shoulder. He swung his light over. It landed on a figure, long limbs, a hunched body, a neck twisted like it had broken in multiple places. He looked like a crane fly, all angular joints and stilted motion. His eyes shone like white flares in the dark. The officer's mouth fell open. He stammered, trying to speak, but only half-formed words spilled out. His hand finished drawing the sidearm, and he turned toward Keaton. Keaton remained still beneath the moonlight, crouched in the sagebrush, motionless. My body started to shake. Then he charged. He burst forward on long, pounding limbs, elbows jutting out as they absorbed the weight of his insectile body. His mouth opened wide, stretching into his neck like a twisted ribbon of pale flesh lined with thorns. He didn't run. He skittered on all fours. The officer stood in a trance. He couldn't raise his revolver. His hands trembled, belt rattling with the weight of his fear. His face had gone pale, sickly, like he'd come down with the flu. Sweat beaded on his forehead beneath the brim of his hat. His radio crackled weakly against his chest. Time froze, held in place. I wanted to speak, to move, to do anything, but my words stuck in my throat, choking me. I was frozen too, paralyzed by the sight of something that monstrous. Somewhere behind me, Dr. Harkham's head began laughing. Keaton was a rolling twister of violence, like staring into an oncoming hurricane, feet glued to the ground. Violence incarnate. He vaulted the railing in a single leap and crashed into the officer with terrifying force. He slammed the man's back against my passenger door so hard the entire truck shifted to the left. That broke my paralysis. I scrambled back into the truck and turned the key. My passenger window was still rolled down, and through it I saw the officer's limp body smashed against the door. His weight bent the metal with a few sharp, hollow pops. Keaton's jaw opened wide, stretching all the way to his throat, a mass of twisting yellow teeth. He was chewing through the officer's skull, tearing flesh, stripping it clean. The flashlight and pistol clattered to the pavement. Then Keaton's eyes came into view, slitted, swollen like two overripe grapes. A predator's eyes, empty, starving. I slammed the gas. The car lurched forward. Something on the officer's duty belt scraped against my paint. I felt a thud as both bodies tumbled off my truck and hit the pavement behind me. In the rear view, I saw Keaton's naked body wrapped around the officer, limbs grasping and tearing. His skin crawled with motion, like the organs inside him were alive and shifting. The flashing lights from the squad car bathed them both in red and blue. One of the cops' boots rolled into the road, its laces dragging behind like it was trying to crawl away without him. Keaton paused, then began pulling the corpse behind him, dragging it like a child pulling along a favorite blanket. When I was a few yards away, Keaton snapped his head sideways at a breakneck speed. His gaze locked directly onto the back of my truck. It was piercing, inevitable, furious, like he just realized I was getting away and the rage hit him all at once. As he grew smaller in the rear view, I saw him heave the officer's body off the ground and toss it deep into the scrublands. Then he started running after me. I climbed faster and faster, 60 miles per hour. The old truck's engine began to rumble beneath me. 70, the engine groaned. I caught the sharp smell of gas fumes. Keaton was gaining. At 80, the truck shook, barely holding together as the engine roared. I burned rubber twisting onto an off-ramp, saw an oncoming car a few miles down the road. My tires nearly lost traction on the gravel, kicking up a flurry of pebbles as I fought for control. Keaton was close enough to reach out. He moved impossibly fast, loping with his long limbs and elbows tucked tight to his sides. I saw the fire burning in his eyes. He was done chasing. He wanted blood, mine. And if he caught me, I knew he wouldn't let me go again. The ashes of mud crackled in the passenger seat like gunpowder. The head lolled from side to side in the footwell. I felt like I was losing my mind, but between the smell of scorched ash, the reek of decay blooming around me as Keaton drew closer, and the sound of the head laughing, I knew I wasn't crazy. This was all real, raw, and wrong. The box I had been stuffing all these impossibilities into was overflowing now. What happens when the box breaks? Would my mind break too? I passed through the arroyos and toward the toll booth borders of this part of the res. The barrier bars were lifted. Was this where the line had been drawn? Could Keaton cross it? He was halfway up the roadside, nearly level with the side of my truck. He wasn't looking ahead. His neck was twisted toward me, his body pounding forward with a mindless kind of purpose. His mouth hung open, eyes wide. Behind me, Dr. Harkham's head shouted with laughter. The engine rattled with speed. Keaton was so close I could smell death. I could see the dried blood of so many victims caked across his twisted, nude body like a suit of crimson armor. Right as I crossed the border barricade, Keaton veered sharply to the left. I watched him clear the fence and crash down in a heap, thrashing on his back like an insect, arms curled toward the sky. The head stopped laughing. The ashes stopped crackling. I slammed the brake pedal to the floor. Keaton writhed. I saw Joe's trailer on the hill, half swallowed in dust, lit by the hard glare of floodlights. I focused the headlights on him. His thrashing slowed, then stilled. My tires thumped over uneven ground as I crept forward, heart burning like a live wire. I stomped the gas, aiming to crush him beneath the weight of the truck, but he leapt at the last second, sprawling across the roof and smashing through the back windshield in a burst of glass. I flung the car into reverse. One tire crunched over his leg. For the first time, I saw pain in Keaton's eyes in the rear view. I clenched my teeth until my jaw ached. Keaton clung to the frame, screeching. He yanked and pulled, his foot pinned like a plank beneath the tire. I slammed into drive. He flew backwards off of the car, his limb bending bending and snapping like a brittle branch. As I climbed toward the hill, I saw him rise again on all fours. One leg was twisted into broken segments, the foot dragging unnaturally across the dirt, and still he came after me. But now there was a break in his stride, he was slower, he was wounded, and if it bleeds, it can die. At least I hope so. I rounded the rise. The area was desolate, not a soul in sight. I hoped that was part of the plan. I prayed it was. I slid in my car into park on the ridge and pulled the parking brake. Behind me, I heard the pounding of hands on earth, getting closer with every second. Keaton landed on my roof with a thud, the metal buckling under his weight. Then he threw himself forward, vaulted over the hood, and smeared blood across the windshield as he rolled and hit the ground. He stood facing me with those reptile eyes, blocking the way to the trailer. Its door was wide open. I pulled the gun from my purse and pointed it at him. He tilted his head and I felt my muscles tense. I wasn't pulling the trigger, something inside me was pulling against it. I fired once. The bullet missed him entirely and buried itself into the trailer wall. Keaton charged. I dropped the pistol and ran around the car. He roared as his broken ankle slammed against the dirt. He scrambled onto the roof again and I ducked to avoid a swipe from his hand. The spot where Mutt had bitten my ankle throbbed and the pain lit sparks behind my eyes as I flexed and pushed through. The body will break itself to escape death, and the mind, drowning in adrenaline, becomes a weapon. But he was feeling it too, the adrenaline. His nervous system was short-circuiting, his mouth open like a wilted flower, tongue flicking through the air. He was tasting something. Could he smell Joe? The others, were they near? He leapt and I dove through the trailer doorway. One of his claws raked across my back. I shoved past a floral couch, knocked pans off a shelf in the narrow kitchen, and bolted toward the bathroom. Keaton thundered in behind me, screaming, "I'll rip out your throat." His voice scraped like rusted wire dragged across concrete, echoing down the narrow hallway. "Play with your insides, eat them." The trailer rocked under Keaton's weight, metal hinges groaning. I slammed the bathroom door behind me and scrambled for the open window. My foot knocked over a toothbrush and a tube of paste as I shoved myself through. Pain flared along my back. The wound on my calf throbbed. Keaton was almost on me. I could feel his heat, the hate radiating off him. The door splintered just as I dove. My teeth cracked against desert stone when I hit the ground. A burst of white light exploded behind my eyes, and blood filled my nose, hot and thick. Something moved past me, fast, silent. I heard the window slam shut, arms wrapped around my torso and dragged me away from the trailer, around to the front by my car. Keaton's voice roared from inside, a storm of curses and blasphemy. He screamed like a trapped coyote, cornered and caged. He'd sensed something was off, but he couldn't help himself. His bloodlust had outpaced his instincts. Now he was trapped. I turned my face upward. The sky above the basin cracked with heat lightning. Purple veins crawled across the clouds. The air buzzed with insect calls and owl cries. The desert had awakened, and it seemed to know what was coming. A man I didn't recognize moved past me, wearing a bandolier of bundled sage and carrying a rawhide pouch that smelled of cedar and cornmeal. He approached the trailer with quiet purpose, opened my truck door, and retrieved the bundle of Mutt's ashes and the shrouded head of Dr. Harkham. With steady precision, he placed them both through a window into the trailer. Another man knelt in the dirt near the rear axle, an elder in a long shirt embroidered with turquoise beads and white ochre. He began to sing in a language I didn't understand. The words were low and heavy, his voice rolling like wind through canyon crests. He poured corn pollen in a slow arc around the trailer, his movements deliberate and unwavering. The others joined in. Their chant rose from the earth like the black smoke from the trailer. The song was older than Keaton, older than the desert. Then came the drum beat, deep and rhythmic. A taut deer hide stretched over a cedar frame, struck in time with the chanting. Inside the trailer, Keaton's limbs thrashed. A hand burst through the kitchen window, blistered and cracking. His skin was changing, splitting, leaking. Joe stood nearby, rifle leveled, his breath slow and focused. The bullets he fired were ceremonial, silver cast and marked with ash and pollen. Each one struck with meaning. Keaton screamed like something dying. His voice scraped against the trailer's walls as flames began to rise from underneath. The tinder place below had caught. Smoke coiled into the night sky, carrying something foul and wrong. The fire grew, hungry and bright, fed not only by gasoline but by intention, by design. Keaton howled as the medicine circle tightened around him. His bleeding eyes gleamed through the flicker of flame, filled with disbelief and fury. He clawed at the walls, tried to find the door, but it had been sealed from the outside with rawhide bindings and sacred paint. He scratched at the windows, too narrow for his spider-like frame to slip through. The chanting never stopped, even when the trailer began to cave inward, even when the screams turned wet and animal. The fire consumed. The wind shifted. I watched Keaton stop fighting. I saw his flesh pock, blister, rupture, and burn. He looked at me through the window the same way Mutt had, with those vacant, unreadable eyes. Keaton sucked up lungfuls of empty breath. Joe watched his home burn to embers. For me, there wasn't a trace of regret in his expression, only that same ruthless, focused anger. I spit blood through my cracked lips, and then the world went quiet. No birds, no insects, not even coyotes, no Keaton, not anymore. Only the breath of the desert and the low hum of thunder threading the sky. We stood and watched the trailer's shell glow red, then crumble. Joe's cousins moved through the sagebrush with extinguishers, tamping out sparks before they could catch. I didn't look away until it was dark, silent, hollow. Then I broke, not cleanly, not quietly. My whole body shook with sobs dragged from someplace beneath grief. I screamed, raw and hoarse, and clung to Joe like a raft in a black ocean. He wrapped me in a musty blanket and said nothing, just held on. One hand pressed firm to my back. I wept into the chest of his shirt. So much gone, so much taken. It better be dead, I said between sobs. We're going to bury the ashes of that guy. Death Spa's gonna make sure it doesn't come back. I used to believe in quiet deaths, gentle ones. That was before Mutt, before the laughing sickness that was Keaton. The world had gone still, no more chase, no more fire, no more road to burn through. Just the sound of my breath hitching, the dull ache in my limbs, and the weight of deep grief settling into my bones.
If you enjoyed these stories, please consider subscribing and liking this video. Let me know your thoughts of these stories in the comments below. I frequently talk to my viewers there. But anyways, I hope you were creeped out.
Just kidding. Stay safe.